See what we can see.
Fucking annoying. All right, if anybody's there, give us a sign.
Funny, we're doing the Challenger stuff when we just had to scrub the launch.
All right, Luna Girl's in. Please tell us that it's working. This is very annoying. Dave, say something.
Something. Say something while I'm waiting.
While I'm waiting? Wait. Something while I'm waiting. It works.
All right.
Too soon? I think she's talking about your comment. All right. Sounds like we are in. For fuck's sake. Bunch of bullshit.
Live from Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Nice.
I think it's the mixer. I think it's actually the USB connection on the mixer. I think that might be what it was.
Really?
Yeah. All right. Let's get...
Make sure you wave your arms emphatically in the form of a keyboard type so that we know if it...
Yeah, give us the signal.
What he's doing? I like your balls. There's no such thing as being productive when the pod's on.
Indeed. All right. Are we good?
All right, we got a good sound check, so let's fucking do this before the shit's the bed again.
I know, right? Oh no, I lost the fucking audio recording again. God damn it. All right. We'll see if this is what fucked it up. So I'm going to start the audio now.
Okay.
Now. So give me a good check.
Test 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1.
Whoa, you are pegged off the fucking scale on that one. And I am like way low. Hello?
Is your mic even on?
That is a good question. Oh my god.
I did not try plugging a grilled cheese sandwich into the USB port.
Hello?
Would that
Is this
be-
thing on? Oh my god, and now I'm fucking pegged. Jesus Christ almighty.
You turned down the gains, right?
I did.
I did.
But now the fucking thing, it's not...
It's not clipping?
Jesus Christ.
What the fuck, man?
Computers.
Holy shit, thing is fucking so wonky.
Yeah. Yeah, we gotta fucking dish this mixer, I swear to God.
Yeah.
Alright, I'm gonna kill our gains just a little bit more. Alright, one more sound check, and then we'll go. Hello! Still pegged out.
Test. Well, turn them down more.
I'll turn you down more.
Yeah, exactly. On the mixer.
I don't want to go too low, because then it's gonna get all fucked up. Alright, hello! Can you still hear me?
Jason's on the second floor of what? The ID10T code. Yes.
I don't know what that's in reference to.
Get a Roadcaster. We love it. Okay.
Okay. Anyway, so we're good. As long as we still sound good, we're going to do this.
Yep.
All right. So let's do it.
It makes you wonder if we need to shift to a point where we're actually monitoring what we sound like. Get on headphones in it, and that way we can hear it automatically.
But it's kind of like wearing a mask. I don't want all that shit on me, you know?
Most people who do podcasts actually fucking do wear headphones. And Rogan does.
Yeah.
And he's doing pretty well with his.
That's what I hear.
Are we ready?
I hear
Jason.
Pretty successful.
Jason's close up with the fucking camera. Probably you're adjusting the mics. All right, we're ready?
Yeah.
And de toi.
From a Gen X point of view is brought to you today by
El Yucateco hot sauce. What?
El Yucateco?
El Yucateco with tacos hot sauce.
Yes. In fact, El Yucateco does go fantastic with tacos.
Yes, I would imagine, because it's hot sauce.
Yes.
And hot sauce and tacos are like a thing.
Yes.
Ordinarily.
So I've heard.
I know you were working this weekend, so you probably didn't have anything for breakfast.
Actually, I did not work this weekend. So,
because your
yeah.
unique situation. Very good.
Yeah, so I actually was home, and I made eggs on both Saturday and Sunday with again, just the standard hot El Yucateco hot sauce. Hold on, let me get the bottle.
While he's getting the bottle,
The salsa picante roja.
he just likes saying Roja.
Yeah, I put that in my eggs this weekend.
Delicioso. So, and we're not going to belabor El Yucateco today. Just go to shopelucateco.com, buy some hot sauce, go on Instagram, tag at GenXPOV with some recipes or however you're making it. Just let them know that we are pimping the shit out of their hot sauce, and make sure you tag us. And that's it. I really want to get into this topic, so we need to we need to do it.
Speaking of which, what are we talking about today?
So we're talking about the Space Shuttle Challenger.
Yeah.
Specifically, the nexus of it is the Netflix special that came out.
The final flight. It's a 4-episode series. Just came out a couple weeks ago on Netflix, and yeah, watched it. Got a lot to say about that, and we're going to combine it with our experiences at the time,
right?
And what we went through, because Dave and I are old enough to remember when all of this shit went down. So we're going to combine that series and our reactions to that along with our experiences.
Exactly. But before we do that,
we're going to talk about our weeks.
There you go.
So
get on it.
Right into my week today. We're recording this on October 5th. On October 5th. So she said ignore her when she came into the room.
Right.
It's like impossible to do so.
I've got to whisper loudly.
And I've been talking about Sober October.
Right.
Leading up to this, I've been talking about it for a few months now. Today is day 5 of Sober October, which it's been fine up to this point. Even with my special caveats, the no fast food, no medications, things like that. Only because I only really drink when we do the podcast.
Right.
So this is going to be the first podcast that we've done in God knows how long where I haven't had any kind of alcohol. So we'll see how it goes.
Excuse me.
And by next week, we'll be getting close to the halfway point already. So I might just be super irritable. I don't know. We'll see how things progress.
You know what? It's not the alcohol bit. It's the you're still working out as much as you were. So to me, it would be like if I can't take fucking Motrin, a lot of Motrin every day, I couldn't fucking move. So
right.
So it's a testament to how you're treating your body like a temple. Kathy thinks you're nuts, by the way.
Really?
You're absolutely insane.
Well, which part?
Probably. We were talking about it in the car. I don't know. I forget how it came up.
To refresh everybody's memory, no alcohol, no fast food, no sugary snacks, no salty snacks, no optional medications, painkillers, and sleep aids.
Yeah. I think it was just the entirety of... She equated to that sect of Catholicism where they tie spikes into their legs and and flagellate themselves.
Go see the movie The Da Vinci Code.
Exactly. Silas... the albino,
yeah,
what he was doing. I forget what the sect of
and which, by the way,
was.
The book far better than the movie. Like not even close.
I 100% agree with that.
So, anyway, but we digress. So yeah, today is day 5 of Sober October. More updates next week. People, learn how to take a fucking joke. So for the past, I don't know, 5 or 6 years now, I have been one of the people that you'll see online that'll constantly either complain or make fun of the far left people of the country who, humor has completely escaped them at this point. You're not allowed to tell jokes at anybody else's expense, whatnot. So I, along with many other, reasonable-minded people, have now, decided to make fun of that. And, they're easy targets, quite frankly. It's like beating up a baby. But, if you're one of these people... like me, who's constantly badgering the far lefties and for how fucking crazy they are, making fun of them and making jokes at their expense, you got to be able to take it on the other side. Case in point, our president last week announced that he now has the coronavirus.
Right.
He is COVID positive. And the day it was announced, I may have posted a meme about him being positive, and I think the exact verbiage was "be positive today" with a picture of Trump holding the thumbs up. I thought it was hilarious because I'm not a hypocritical douchebag who can, take jabs on one side and not the other.
Right.
So, all the people who were appalled by this, because I got some messages about this.
Oh shit.
you're fucking hypocrites. Because I know you're all the same fucking people who love making fun of the far lefties, saying, oh, they can't take a joke, humor is fucking dead because of these people.
Right.
And if you see me posting something like this, it wasn't nefarious. I just thought it was fucking
Yeah.
funny.
Sometimes funny is funny.
Yeah.
And people, you're right. People are wound so fucking tight right now that they can't see the fucking, they just, there's like an analogy there that I can't fucking think of. Fuck
Right.
those guys.
So, you
and
know-
oh, by the way, like we had the fucking virus. So we're in a unique perspective of like, yeah, we know what he's going through.
And he was probably going through it a hell of a lot worse, quite frankly, because of his physical condition. Though he did have the better medical care.
Yeah. He has the, we're going to have the steroid treatment. We're going to have fucking antivirals and all this other shit where us peons, I'm in the VA system and I get a fucking inhaler a month after I had the fucking virus.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's while he may be suffering differently, his medical care obviously is much better than ours.
Indeed. So yeah, again, if you're willing to make jokes at the expense of one side but get appalled by the other side, you're a hypocrite. So just stop.
Yep.
Moving on, we got gifts.
What?
So first of all, good friend of ours, the John, calls me up last week and he's like,
Okay.
"Hey man, you at work these days?" I'm like, "Actually, I am." So he's like, "Hey, I have something for you." So, God, what was this? Last Thursday or Friday, he came over to my office.
Excuse me.
Dave choked on his Diet Coke.
Yeah, God.
And no, he came over to my office. We sat down. We talked for like an hour. It was the first time I talked to him in months.
Yeah.
So we had a really good talk, and he gave me something. So in this envelope, he gave me something that he's had since he was 4 or 5 years old, something to that effect. And it is, I don't know how well you can see it in the video, but it is an original draft of the Return of the Jedi script.
Neat.
Yes.
Holy shit.
And he's kept it in pretty damn good condition this whole
Yeah.
time.
It's beautiful.
So he was telling me about how there's some differences in this script than there are in the actual movie. And I went through, I read some of it, and yeah, I noticed some stuff also. The biggest example I can think of off the top of my head is when Obi-Wan is talking to Luke. Certain point of view.
Yeah,
that-
I just opened to that.
Yeah, and he talks about Anakin and so how he like left him in the fire or in the lava or something like that. Which again, this was made in '83, a decade and a half before the fucking prequels came out.
Yeah.
So
Well, shit. This copy is dated with December of '81.
right. So it
So
was
even-
because it was probably an early draft of the script. The shit changes even as they're filming it. The scripts change. People ad lib. It's not what you see in the final fucking.
Right. I like how I opened to from a certain point of view, like
Yeah,
right,
which
right
is
into
great.
that. Yeah.
So, but yeah, somewhere in that conversation, Obi-Wan references leaving him in like a fucking volcano pit or something like that. So, yeah, very, very cool though. So, thank you to our good friend the John, who was a guest on the All Things Star Wars podcast
Hell yeah.
multiple times, and we may have to figure out a way to fit him into this at some point.
Indeed. Yeah. Oh man, this is fucking awesome. I'd love to just read it outright, just for the differences.
So, in addition to that, also last week, old friend of mine, his name's Jeremy. He used to work in the 108th. In fact, if it wasn't for this guy, Jeremy, you and I probably wouldn't even know each other.
Huh.
So my life would be completely different if it wasn't for this guy, which I'll elaborate here in a minute. But he calls me up. He's like, "Hey man, I'm moving to Ohio." I'm like, "Oh, well, that's cool, I guess." He's like, "So I've got all these books," and he takes this picture. Unfortunately, you can't see it on the video.
Right.
But he's got these 2 massive totes filled with fucking books. And he's like, "Do you want these? Because I'm just going to throw them out otherwise." I'm like, "Yes." And he's like, "Okay, well, you got to come pick them up like tomorrow or something because we're heading out to Ohio to start house hunting." So he hasn't moved yet, but he's going to this month. But yeah, so I have all of these fucking paperback books. I'll see if I can kind of show the camera.
There's a lot of books here.
Yeah, a lot of fucking books. There's some hardcovers in there too, which I think some of those hardcovers are Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's almost all like fantasy and sci-fi.
Yeah, it's not exclusively Star Wars titles, but there's a lot of Star Wars there.
There's a lot of Star Trek stuff. There's a Timothy Zahn book, not a Star Wars Timothy Zahn book in there.
Oh yeah,
All-
Judgment at Proteus.
Judgment at Proteus. Yeah, so I gotta root through these at some point and kind of see if there's anything that I'm really anxious to read. But yeah, thanks to Jeremy for giving me this is seriously like at least 100 books.
There's a lot of books in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
So, but yeah, this guy Jeremy. So I met him in my first tour in active duty. In fact, he and I enlisted the same year.
Okay.
96.
Right.
We both. He's from West Virginia, and I'm from California, obviously. But we both ended up here at McGuire, maintenance on the KC-10s. He was a crew chief. I was an avionics guy. We lived in the same dorm when we got here to base, so we were like right in the same hallway. So we met. We knew we worked in the same section. Immediately clicked. Had a lot of the same interests. So I kept in touch with him after I separated from active duty, because after my first 4 years, I'm like, fuck the military, I'm out.
Right.
And I moved back to California. I separated. Kristen and I moved out there with the intent that we were going to start our lives in California post-military. Well, after about a year and a half, that didn't quite work out. So, and I just so happened to still be in contact with Jeremy, and he's like, dude, after I separated, I just walked across the street and joined the Air National Guard, the New Jersey Air National Guard. He's like, they're fucking paying for my college tuition. I'm still collecting my GI Bill. They're basically paying me to go to college. It's great. I'm like, ooh, that sounds interesting. So I called up a recruiter the next day. They're like, yeah, we can get you in. We've got plenty of maintenance openings. So within a couple of months, I was back here in New Jersey and in the 108th. So that's how I ended up in the unit where you and I eventually met.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Huh.
So
It always comes down to one person.
yeah,
Like
that can have such a major impact on your life.
yeah, that one person that like plants the seed of like, hey, there's potential for something here.
Yeah.
And you fucking move towards that, and then poof, there it is. That whole branch of your fucking life suddenly takes off.
Yeah.
That's fucking amazing.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine what my life would be like had we not had that conversation at that exact time.
Right.
When, things were very obviously not working out as I'd hoped back out in California, the post-military life that I was looking forward to having. And here I am. This was in 2001.
Right.
The end of 2001 when he and I had that conversation. I joined in like March or April of 2002, the 108th. So yeah, we're 18 years later.
Holy shit.
Here I am.
That's
Still-
crazy too, because you ended up in the same shop that I was in
Yeah.
when I started in the 108th.
Yeah, which is fun too. Like our paths ran kind of parallel, but we never quite crossed paths.
Yeah, because I already went to the White Jet.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you were coming to the 108th, I was already in the White Jet.
Yeah.
Basically doing the same thing up until 02, 03 when we converted to be flyers. But
Right.
yeah, that's fucking amazing.
And I think we even decided too that our training time at Keesler was almost the exact same. Like I left a couple months before you got there.
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
So,
we just missed each other at Keesler.
so it's just so weird how things work. Such a small fucking world.
I know. It's,
So, yeah. But again,
That's
thank
awesome.
You thank you to Jeremy for all the books. Thank you to the John for the script.
yeah.
Moving on with my week. I know I talked about it last week when Nick was here about buying a guitar. I bought one.
Okay.
And I got the text message today, right as I was about to leave work, that it's ready to go be picked up because I had it delivered to the Guitar Center over in Cherry Hill by the Cherry Hill Mall.
Okay.
So I just have to go pick it up. But I couldn't get it today because
We're busy. We
doing
got
a
things to do.
podcast. So, but yeah, so my guitar lessons will probably start tomorrow.
So you're gonna do concurrently. You're gonna
Yeah.
do piano and you're gonna do guitar.
Yeah, I'm loving it, man.
That's awesome.
I kick myself every day for not starting this fucking 30 years ago. But
You can't change that.
no, you can't, but you can at least move forward, and that's what I'm doing. So it's never too late. And again, with this new lease on life, as I like to say, that we got after COVID, I'm fucking taking full advantage of all of it.
Bronco Fett's going to turn fantasy football into the new Republic Commando. We're just going to avoid it because he's so excited about talking about it.
Right? Apparently, he's doing well. Speaking of fantasy football, I mean, do we want to talk about how I beat the shit out of both members of the Escape Pod in fantasy in the first 3 weeks of fantasy football, or 4 weeks?
Nah.
No,
No, we probably
don't
shouldn't.
need to mention that.
No.
How I just fucking whooped their monkey asses all over fantasy football land. Okay, well, if we're not going to talk about how
we don't.
badly I beat those two, then
Right.
we can just move on to your week.
Sure. Should we talk about... Well, I mean, I guess I shouldn't talk about how badly I'm getting beaten. Listen, we'll get it out there right now because we're just to get it over with.
Mm-hmm.
The fantasy football The Fets are doing well. I'm losing to. Oh no, I'm losing to Brady right now.
Okay.
But legitimately, I don't know if I'm going to win a game in fantasy. It's just I'm not. My teams just are not. They're not scoring as much as the other team, which is the definition of losing. So
That's a John Maddenism. To win the game, you need to score more points than your opponent.
100% correct. So, yeah, I'm following fantasy. I'm doing my best, but I feel like I'm constantly behind the power curve on this. So my B- fucking draft score is complete nonsense when everyone else is beating the shit out of me.
Honestly, I attribute this to a lot of what we were talking about before the show went on the air, with the just how it doesn't feel like a real season in the NFL, quite frankly, because of COVID and everything else. It's no preseason, no crowds. It's just it doesn't feel right. And I know we've talked about this before.
Yeah, and it kind of goes to the fact that last night was a football game between my Philadelphia Eagles and your San Francisco Giants that obviously, what'd I say? Giants?
Yeah.
San Francisco 49ers. Sorry, I had baseball mix up. And my football team won. The Eagles won. And
Allegedly. I didn't actually see a single minute of the game, so
Right.
all I had to go off was the news story when I woke up this morning.
I can confirm, and I wish I had posted something. I was like, oh, I want to leave this for Jason to see first thing in the morning when he looks at his phone, but
Yeah.
I just had to go to fucking bed because it's late. It's 8 o'clock game on the East Coast. It's
Right.
fucking late, but it was worth it. Stayed up watching the game. Here's why I want to bring this up. During the game, I mean, the Eagles won. They were playing better. The San Francisco, that Mueller kid just did not look right.
Oh, Mullins, the quarterback.
Mullins, yeah. He just was not having his best game. They put your third string guy in there at one point.
Yeah.
And I'll take the victory. But at one point in the game, in the
And you're
second,
in first, by the way.
yeah, first place
One,
in
2-1, and you're in first.
the NFC least. The fact that it was actually a graphic on fucking NBC last night was awful.
Yeah.
But NBC on their broadcast, they actually made it a point to say, hey, we're going to turn off this I forget what they called it, but basically it was the crowd noise.
Yeah,
the
crowd noise.
the generated crowd noise that they're having, that obviously what you can, I think both of us kind of assumed that, like, there was something going on in the stadium, but obviously they maybe dubbed it a little bit louder for the television audience.
Yeah.
They shut that off. They shut it off for an entire series for the Eagles, an entire series for the fucking 49ers. Nothing. There was nothing. Yeah. You heard pads, you heard grunting, you heard fucking call at the line, all that shit. There was nothing going on in the stadium.
Which is fucking weird.
Maybe, I think on touchdowns or something like that, they had the horn go or whatever. Sure. But otherwise, nothing going on in that stadium. So the fact, it kind of brings up the point that we made after week one, where it's like, or I think I made it on week two, is what are they playing for? There's not even like a fake audience to fucking get highs and lows from. You've got this just deafening silence that you're playing in, and people are, with the injuries and everything else, they're affecting their careers and everything else. It's a season that they're playing for fucking ad revenue only, not for the benefit of the fan. And it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like a normal season. And then COVID this week has affected it with the Titans game, which is being played tonight. The Titans Patriots game, it was the KC. Who was KC playing?
KC and the Patriots.
KC and Patriots.
And Titans are playing some other team.
Yeah, it's all
Pittsburgh.
this. There you go. It's all fucking dicked up. And from a fantasy perspective, we're making it work. But really, it is Green Bay. It's Green Bay.
Because the Pittsburgh game got pushed, right? Because that game just isn't happening, period.
Yeah, not this week.
Right.
At some point out there. And there's going to be weird bye weeks and everything else. It's just so fucking strange. Defenses are getting blown apart across the board. Listening to them talk about it, like the average scoring for yesterday was like 55 points in a game. Jesus. The offenses are going bananas. Yeah. It's like juice baseballs in fucking baseball. Offenses are going bananas. Defenses are fucking getting destroyed. And it's showing why. Look, you don't have a preseason. You don't have a proper offseason. You don't know what the fuck is going on from week to week. And now this is what you're going to get. this product. And oh, by the way, I mean, college football is playing right now. In a couple weeks, when the Big Ten starts, we're going to see the same thing.
Yeah.
We're going to see the same thing, and it's not fucking good. Next QB with mono. I don't know why QBs would get mono. Maybe your boy Jimmy G with this fucking isn't mono the kissing disease?
Yeah.
I bet you he makes out with himself in the fucking mirror.
I think it's like somebody once told me that it's a strain of herpes, technically.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Some viral shit.
Yeah, you just don't get sores on your dick. I guess.
Different source.
Yeah.
But yeah, football. Eagles won. Hooray! And that's the kind of season it is. I can't even really celebrate all that much. I'm glad they won.
We weren't talking shit before the game or
and
anything.
I talked a little bit of shit last week. I predicted a victory. And oh, by the way, I also got a text from one of our former commanders who's like, "Hey, do you think the Eagles are going to win this game?" Because I guess San Fran was giving like 8 or more.
Fuck.
Yeah, and I was like, yes. Yes.
Yeah,
I said
betting with the spread for sure.
And I predicted that there would be a pick 6 and it would be the difference in the game, and there was.
Oh, I didn't realize.
It was fucking fantastic. So
I haven't even watched highlights yet.
Oh, it was fucking great, but it was entertaining. So it was worth staying up late, and I was entertained watching football.
Yeah.
So
All right, let's move on from football.
Squadrons. I know people are out there in the Cantina land and are from our all things Star Wars background that are playing Squadrons right now and kind of getting into it. I'm going to give you the boilerplate, like Dave version of what I think of Squadrons right now.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
Okay.
But I can see why on Xbox this would be a tough game to play.
Oh, really?
Because the just controllers, like trying to do this with a controller and like multiple axes, is I could see that being a challenge. It doesn't play like the space battles of Battlefront 2, which is good. But there's a lot of cross flow, and I think some of the voicing is like straight out of Battlefront 2. I mean, it's still an EA product, right?
Sure, yeah.
So some of the voicing and everything else, and I am enjoying myself because I'm playing it on the PC. I'm playing it on this with a joystick that has a fucking Z-axis where I can actually, as I'm flying, I have the throttle's connected. I don't have a separate throttle like you do. You can't buy those, by the way.
Really?
Like you can't buy them anywhere right now. Like they are sold out. They've been sold out for months. Like anticipation of this game and a Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Oh, right.
So even if I wanted to get one of those, I couldn't. So, but I have an older Microsoft, Flight Sim joystick that has a Z-axis where I can twist. So when I'm flying a TIE fighter, I can actually like go into like a hard bank and twist and actually fly. I love flying it. I'm in a mindset of just like I was when I was playing TIE Fighter. The gameplay itself in the dogfight mode, and then they have like a bigger I forget what they're calling it. I've mainly been playing the dogfighter mode.
Okay.
And the maps are rendered amazing. Like I haven't had any issues with latency or anything like that. I can tell you that the X-Wing flies like a fucking pig compared to a TIE Fighter.
Yeah.
And
it really moves.
It's when you initially start fire up the game, it puts you into the story mode, and the story mode really felt like it was a tutorial. And it made me go in. It had you in both cockpits. It had you in the TIE cockpit, and it had you in an X-Wing cockpit. Okay. I bailed out of that. Yeah. Mainly because I didn't want to fucking fly an X-Wing. That's not why I bought this game. I wanted to fucking fly a TIE Fighter.
Yeah. And
so the story mode, if it's going to put me in both, where I have to go back and forth, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in that. Give me something like the TIE Fighter game from back in the 90s where it's like, okay, here's these, go out on individual missions. Yeah. But it's not really designed for that because it's in this New Republic era.
Yeah. And
it's just not set up for that. So right now, like I played for about an hour after work today before I came over here. And I'm just dogfighting, getting in and flying TIE Fighter and just enjoying the shit out of it.
Is it multiplayer or like against bots? How you?
You can do both. I've been playing multiplayer, so you're basically, I think it's 5-on-5, and it's just you're going into maps that have a lot of like like exploded ordnance that's all in like the atmosphere. Like there's the best is it Bestman or no, it's not Bestman. The Yavin map where it's just out in space, so there's nowhere to hide. So when you're dodging missiles and shit, like it's just like just this that fucking the ball of dogfighting, and it's fun. I'm enjoying it. Is it going to knock your socks off, especially if we're on a console? I don't. Probably not. I mean, honestly, I think I need to play a little bit more in the other modes,
Right.
and maybe even finish the story mode to really get an impression. But I don't really give a shit. I just want to fly. That's the whole thing for me. Is I want to be in the cockpit of a TIE fighter, flying it, and getting better the longer I go. So I can't, like I said, I can't speak to the console bit, even though I fucking bought it for the console. I haven't played it because I know that I want the joystick. I want to actually fly with a control stick and a separate throttle. I know, talking to Nick briefly, he said he had an issue with the one controller because it was controlling the yaw and the throttle. So you go to try and yaw the aircraft and you're actually decelerating.
Like controller?
Yeah.
Okay.
And obviously any dual analogs, it's going to be the same with PlayStation, I would imagine. So,
well, if you want to borrow my good joystick, you're more than welcome. So the one that's got the throttle and the fucking joystick and like a billion buttons.
you know what the problem with that is? That I would fucking get used to it and then I would need to have it. So at this point, I'm happy. I'm happy with my setup. I think maybe if Santa brings me an upgraded setup for that, then perhaps.
Kathy, call me if you're looking for gift ideas for Dave.
She will. She will do that.
Yeah, well, now I have one.
Fleet battles. Thank you, Dragon Buddy. Fleet battles. Dragon Buddy's been playing. It isn't crazy great, but it's fun. It's fun flying the TIE fighter because it's in cockpit. Like you see the hands going back and forth.
Oh, nice.
It's set up very with good human factor setup where even with my old controller, like I still have easy access to firing off flares and chafe and selecting targets and different power settings where if I want to have stronger guns or push into more acceleration, and you can modify your tie, which is something that wasn't in the previous games, where I can go in and when you earn each time you level up, you earn some. It's not credits, it's something else. You get like
Credits will do fine.
They do fine actually, but you can the things that we saw in the previews where they had like the shit hanging from the fucking rearview mirror, like that type of thing.
Right.
You can customize your holograms and shit like that. So I've messed around a little bit with that. I put a fucking Imperial logo on the side of my TIE fighter, just because I could. But yeah, changing my engine setup so that it has more acceleration, and you can tweak it like that, and it's actually pretty neat. So, Dragon Ball again. Console is rough on a controller, steep curve, but it's Lunar Girl, get Dragon Buddy a flight stick.
Lunar Girl, give me a call. I can tell you exactly what to buy.
There, yes, I've seen his setup. It is nice. But yeah, I would say if you're interested in just going out and flying a TIE fighter or even an X-wing, if that's what you choose, which you're wrong, but it's fun for that. It really is. The dogfighting is fun. The graphics are great. They're really, really good. Like I said, I haven't had any issues with latency or anything else, and I'm about in the mid power band with my setup. I'm not maxed out like for some stuff. I can imagine on VR you'd probably need, a little bit more power, but I don't see it there. But yeah, that's.
All right, let's move on from squadrons because we still got a lot to talk about today.
And you will do it. The only other thing I had going on, like talking about our weeks, is this past weekend my daughter had her 21st birthday. So.
And this is your youngest child.
My youngest child
is
now 21. So we did some stuff for the weekend and ended up having a real nice weekend, and it was good. It just went by really fast. Yeah. I mean, that's the big thing. Now, it's kind of one of those milestones reached. Now, like from a child perspective, like an adulting perspective, it's a little weird.
Yeah.
It's a little weird.
Yeah, not looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Still got a few years.
You do. And you know what? It goes by quick. You got to enjoy it. Enjoy the time you can get with your kids because it goes by quick, man. It really does. The next thing you know, you're old. You'll be older than me having to deal with that nonsense.
Yeah. Ugh.
But yeah, that's it. That's it for my week. Sorry, Ivo G.
And you just kind of had to make things depressing right before we get into the challenge.
Well,
stuff.
well, listen. I put it in the notes, and we are going to talk like this is a heavy subject.
Yeah.
Um,
And for me, and we're going to get into some of the more details, but it wasn't very heavy for me back in the day. But watching this fucking documentary, I'll just say by the end of the 4th episode, like fucking tears are just rolling down my fucking face.
If you didn't get fucking kicked squarely in the fucking feels, then something wrong with you.
And
There's something wrong with you.
Yeah. So, all right, before we kind of jump too far ahead, moving on to the main topic, do you need to take a break or anything before
I'm
we
good.
start? All right, same here. So, yeah, we're going to kind of combine our experiences with this Challenger, the final flight, the Netflix series. Came out September 16th, so yeah, we're only just a hair over 2 weeks removed from that. And it's 4 episodes, about 45 minutes each on average.
Yeah, I think the last one's like 50 something.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen it, for the love of God, go watch it. It's
honestly,
great. Even if you know all the details already.
yeah, which I'm really familiar with all the details of it, and I still appreciated what they were doing.
Yeah.
In it, like this is not a worry about spoilers. This series is about an event that most people know about, some to a varying degree or another. They know what happened, so it's really not about spoiling it. We know what happened.
Yeah, but I think the series did a really good job of investing you in the human aspect of this, not just the physical disaster of the shuttle itself exploding, but it really gives you a sense of this crew that were part of this flight, and even some of the astronauts who weren't part of the flight,
Right.
but were involved in the shuttle program.
Yep.
So the human element that they get into, running in parallel with everything else going on, first with like the pressure on NASA to get these fucking flights off, and the standing up the shuttle program in general. It's
Yeah, and I think that's for anybody who's really concerned about, having some like overly detailed technical aspect of this accident. It's not what this is.
No,
it
not
really
at all.
isn't. They don't even really get into any detail at all from a technical perspective. I mean, they mentioned some stuff that came up in different review boards and shit like that, but
Yeah.
the reality of the amount of engineering that would have been involved in this, that has been talked about over years and years and years, like it doesn't get into it at all. Like you said, it's about the humans, it's about the people that were involved in it.
But they do dumb down the error and the problem enough for any layperson
Sure.
watching can understand and follow and still realize, oh, that was pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
So why don't we pivot a little bit and kind of talk about some of our early experiences? Because again, you and I were I had just turned 9 the month before this happened. And then you must have
I was
been-
10.
Yeah, so you were 10. So we were fairly young elementary school kids when this happened. And, we're going to talk about some of our experiences first before we go into the details of the accident and then the series. So, you know what? I'm just going to read that blurb from the Wikipedia article.
Yeah,
first,
no,
because
absolutely.
I looked this up on Wikipedia, and it's talking about the reaction and what happened afterwards and some of the trauma of kids our age that they faced from this, and some of like the what is it, when you have an experience and then like it fucking haunts you?
PTSD.
PTSD, yeah, like some like PTSD effects from this.
Right.
So I pulled this paragraph from the Wikipedia article because this is so fitting for this situation. Children on the East Coast recalled the event more easily than children on the West Coast. Due to the time difference, children on the East Coast either saw the explosion on TV while in school or heard people talking about it. On the other side of the country, most children were either on their way to school or just beginning their morning classes on the West Coast. Researchers found that those children who saw the explosion on TV had a more emotional connection to the event and thus had an easier time remembering it. After 1 year, the children's memories were tested, and those on the East Coast recalled the event better than those on the West Coast. Regardless of where they were when it happened, the Challenger explosion was still an important event, and many children easily remembered. So I think this kind of hit the nail on the head, for at least for me, because I vaguely remember getting to school and the teachers like already being upset early on
Mm-hmm.
in the day. And it's like, well, what the hell's going on? And they're like, yeah, the shuttle Challenger exploded. No, the shuttle Challenger exploded, and we're like, oh shit, that's the one where they were gonna like send up a teacher or something, right? Because again, at 8, 9 years old, you're not really in tune with fucking world news or even, U.S. news or anything like that. And then we'll talk about how much we knew of the space program at that time. I didn't know shit. So I kind of heard something about a teacher going up into space, wasn't really paying attention, didn't even realize that was the day it was going to happen. And then, yeah, the teachers are already talking about it. People are upset. I more remember the response afterwards because, like, the hearing it at first, again, with the, I wouldn't say disinterest that I had in it, but with the lack of exposure that I had, my reaction was probably something to the effect of, man, that really sucks. I wonder what Lion-O and the Thundercats are doing this afternoon. So it was that kind of a reaction. But what the stronger memories for me are the aftermath, the constantly playing of the explosion on
Yeah.
TV, the hearings and everything else, like Ronald Reagan's address to the nation that night. I remember the response far more than I remember learning of the news
Right.
of it happening. So that's kind of my experience with this. So I know you have a much different perspective when it comes to this.
Yeah, because I was a kid who was utterly obsessed with the space shuttle, like from before Columbia even launched. So you're talking about Columbia was in '81,
Yeah.
and I was already, I have proof of some level of obsession right here, but
Yeah, some sacred texts.
yeah. So as a kid, this is something that my dad and I were like this that we kind of shared together. I think I talked about it before, where we would actually build models that involved the space shuttle. Like we built actual models of the orbiter and with the external tanks and the SRBs, and because in my room at the time we build these models and put them on monofilament so they'd be in my room flying. And I was always obsessed with being a pilot and flying and everything else. This has been something that's been it's in my genetic code. So working on things like this, and I remember being real young and watching the Enterprise make that first shuttle landing because it was on the news. They talked about it, where you had this image of the space shuttle with the cone on the back landing at Edwards.
Yeah.
And that was like a big deal because it came off of a fucking 747. The space shuttle comes off of 747 and then it glides down to make this fucking landing. And it was just mind blowing for me as a kid.
Yeah.
And my dad, we had a model, like an Estes model of, not Estes, I forget who the model company was, honestly, but
Nuts.
but we had the model of the 747 with the orbiter on it. And I just, the memories of sitting at the kitchen table and my dad painting the tires on this aircraft, like this level of detail.
Yeah.
And we had distinct conversations about, do we, for the orbiter model that we built with the external tank, because when Columbia went up, the external tank was white because it was still in a test phase. And then they realized that it like for temperature and everything else, they painted it like the brown color that you always saw afterwards.
Yeah.
So we had conversations about that. We wanted to be a white, or do we want it to be with the brown? So this is me as a child, well before the accident. Did you get
got him, fucker?
bastards?
Bugs in the
I don't.
studio.
I think it's the big one. The big one's still hanging out there.
Yeah, it is.
So, being a space shuttle obsessed kid, my dad reached out to somebody that he knew for a copy of. This is basically the press guide for the space shuttle. This was circa 1982. This has all of the technical details of the shuttle. It is not a Reader's Digest version. It gets into details about the orbiter, the solid rocket boosters, everything else. It talks about fuel types. It talks about how it's constructed. It talks about systems inside the orbiter that control everything. Has parts breakdowns and everything else. Very, very detailed stuff that people would use for detail work if they're writing a story about the shuttle or anything else.
Right, but not like technical manuals
Right.
to that level.
It's, if you can imagine, like, if this was a TO, this is the, like, basically the forward talking the overview of the systems without getting into the detail of the systems.
Yeah.
I had this as a kid, and this is one of my prized possessions,
Yeah.
like of my existence, is this book. And I
You got that memo in the back too.
yeah, it's I don't know if people can see it on the thing. I just want the benefit of that's what it looks like. And then there's a memo in the back. It's actually from the a gentleman named Al Seashafe, Media Services Center Manager. Dear Inspector Martin, in request for your telephonic communication, we enclose a Space Shuttle News reference. This publication should give you all information required for past and future flights of our space transportation system. If we can refer to the system, do not hesitate to call. And this is from the JF Kennedy Space Center.
That's incredible.
So why this is important is when I was home that day for whatever reason. This was a big deal in the schools and everything else because of the teacher aspect and everything else. And we were kind of following along with it. But for whatever reason, this particular day, I was home from school. And for the life of me, I can't remember why.
Yeah.
Because the events of the day kind of usurped everything else.
Oh, sure.
And it was the moment of it happening, standing in my living room. We talked earlier in the pod about like our experiences with our televisions and shit like that.
Yep.
So the Sony Trinitron in our living room,
That one that you said your dad still has?
most likely. I remember standing there. I could tell you the exact look angle and everything else from like how I was watching this when it happened. And I watched it live. I was ready to watch it the day before when they scrubbed, and watching the lead into that. So I don't think I was sick or anything else because I was up walking around. And this is, I was 10 years old. This is like 5th grade, time frame. Mm-hmm. So it's like normal school behavior, like remember a lot of stuff, from that age bracket. And I was standing there watching it live when it happened. And that's the image. If you talk about the actual watching of it live, and having that burned in, like, to me, it was a regular shuttle launch, all the same camera angles. Like back in those days, like it was, you watched the shuttle launch. If you watch one, you watch a dozen of them, right? But I wanted to watch all of them. Yeah. So when I was watching it and it got off the pad, to me, I was more relieved, I guess, at that point, because as a 10-year-old, even with knowing stuff about the space shuttle, I didn't know enough about it to realize where the risk was in certain sequences of the flight. Mm-hmm. So thing lifts off and I'm kind of like, oh wow, it's going to be awesome. Right. And back in those days, like we get such great camera angles now when you're watching, a rocket launch or anything else. Like in those days they had, the camera was zooming so close into the shuttle. Like you got this image of the shuttle in the upper atmosphere. Just glowing like that, and the pictures were just amazing. And to me, that's what I remember. It's like, wow, this is so amazing. And the breakup, the explosion, and then I can tell you exactly like what frame of the breakout when they go poop and they popped into the larger view, like they almost pulled the camera back, and because they knew it was like, oh fuck, something happened. Boom, they bring the camera back, and then you see, kind of saw things as they were happening. Yeah. And the dead quiet on the fucking television. That initial, like, is the sound broken? There's nothing happening right now. Yeah. And it's it's in that moment where in my head I was like, holy fuck. And they're like suddenly panning to the crowd, like if something that they show in the documentary, they show these close-ups of Kristen McCall's fucking parents, and those fucking pictures were on there immediately. Like before the debris had fallen into the ocean, they're fucking showing the pictures of Kristen McCall's parents, who, in disbelief. And that's the shit that I remember. And one of the first things I did was I ran and got this fucking book, like to try and figure out what the fuck happened. Yeah. You know, what could have possibly caused this thing to fucking have this catastrophic explosion? And I was immediately fucking buried in this book
Wow.
within minutes of it happening, and it's just like my world was shaken.
Yeah.
Because as we talk about in this documentary, you know, NASA was batting like 1,000.
Yeah.
You know, we had the old lunar launches, and you know,
And they talked about everything. They talked about Apollo 13. And
Yeah.
You know, they were halfway to the fucking moon. Some shit went down, but
Yep.
you know, we got them back safe.
and
So
it was the you know, that arrogance that they talk about in the documentary, which we'll talk about here more in a little bit. You know, even as a kid following the program, I had no expectation of something this catastrophic to happen.
Yeah.
I knew what could happen, like if something failed and if they had to separate the orbiter.
Right,
I knew
right.
why the landing facility was there at the Cape. I knew way too much about this stuff, and I don't know that if it actually helped or hurt me as a kid. Like, you talk about the trauma and how it affects, because having serious conversations with, you know, my parents afterwards, and then going to school, and that's all it was talked about.
yeah.
was what had happened. And there was some level of, like, you know, because they were watching it live in school, you know, at the time.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because they're bringing it up in the chat. A lot of the folks in the chat said that, yeah, they never showed it at my school. And had this happened during school hours at my school, they probably wouldn't have shown it at my school either, because it was a very poor school. You know, we didn't have fucking televisions with cable feeds or anything like that. So even if this had happened later on in the day, still wouldn't have seen it at my school.
So I think what happened at my elementary school, and I've given this a lot of thought, especially because we were doing it for the pod, and I think only certain classrooms were going to be watching it. Like, they only had so many TVs. You know, they had the roller fucking television that you could roll into a fucking room, and it may very well have been the reason I was home, was so that I knew I'd get to see it,
Right.
as opposed to, you know, being stacked up, you know, 4 deep in the library trying to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how obsessive I was about this.
Apparently, there's something wrong with my audio again. Let me know if it's fixed, please.
But yeah, and it wasn't like that I went to a nicer school, and I think that there was limitations, but enough people had watched it, and it was fucking an event. And Jason, everyone's getting a close up view of Jason's face. Ironically, talking about the shuttle and it's having technical issues, and then we're having some sound issues, but yeah, it was this documentary. I knew it was going to dredge up a lot for me, just because of how just into the space shuttle and the space shuttle program. Let me give you a little bit more insight into how obsessed Dave is even today. So I've actually made it a point now to get. There were some space shuttle toys that I had as a kid that I wanted to get again. Like, they're gone, or they're buried somewhere. Who, God only knows. But there was a couple of different toys. One, and there was a die-cast 747 with the shuttle on top. I was going to bring it. I didn't want to risk breaking it. I managed to find it on eBay for stupid cheap, and it was actually in better shape than the one I had was. Because I remember playing with it, and one of the landing gear wouldn't come down. And it's like, you know, the 747 is like this wide. You know, it's big. And then I have a little NASA. It's the command. Basically a vehicle that they would do for like tracking. It had a big satellite dish on top, and the little door opened, and it would look like an RV with a satellite dish on top.
Right.
And it's a NASA command, the Space Shuttle Command Center. You know, all the stuff that came out in 1980. And I you know, thinking about, even when we were getting ready to start this podcast, as a Gen Xer, I'm like thinking about those things, and like, wow, I really wish I still had those things, because it's a moment in time that probably for people at the parallel our generation that grew up in the Apollo space program, when there was toys and it was on TV all the time and everything else, like the space shuttle was that for us, For me.
Right.
I'll say that for me.
For the people who had that level of interest.
Right. For my level of nerddom. And let's face it, it was big enough that you see it in the documentary that there was enough people involved in it and it was enough of a nationwide story because NASA wanted, look, no bucks, no Buck Rogers is what they said back in the Apollo program.
Yep.
So NASA knew that if they didn't have public interest, they weren't going to get the funding from Congress.
Right, which, that's what they get into with the documentary. They get deep into that. And honestly, you get hints of that in the movie Apollo 13. I don't know if you remember, but there's one scene early on after they were in space heading towards the moon, and they're supposedly doing like a live broadcast, and they're playing around, doing all kinds of stuff, pandering to the camera, and they're like, guys, we went off the air a while ago. They preempted you for like fucking some shit.
I don't think they told them. The movie portrays that they just let them do it, and Houston didn't tell them that they weren't on the air anymore.
Right.
They were just doing it for the sake of doing it. And it was fact. The United States, our attention span is so fucking short that we had all this goodwill and national attention put towards the Apollo program, landing guys on the moon, that we made going to the moon fucking boring.
Yeah.
Like now it's like it was commonplace because we were sending people back to the moon, and it wasn't until fucking lives were at risk, when people realized how fucking dangerous it is. Like, no shit dangerous it is. And that's the compelling drama, right? That's what people are... excuse me. It's Jason's monkey fucking the soundboard.
Just wanted to sound right, that's all.
Yeah, no,
Sorry.
But yeah, it's like I said, it's cyclical. It happened with the Apollo program. The same thing was happening with the shuttle. They were behind schedule. It was supposed to be so much cheaper in the space program, and it wasn't. So, okay, how do we do it? It's fucking, all right, we're going to put a regular schmuck, some teacher from some suburban area of fucking the United States of America, and we're going to put them in this multi-billion-dollar system.
Mm-hmm.
And
goddamn death tube.
Well, and you think about the why. Why do it? What is the greater science aspect of it?
Okay, so let's put a pin in that.
Yeah,
because there's a comment made towards the end of this series that I really took issue with, and it's along those lines. So, is there anything that we want to talk about childhood experiences before we get into some of the details of this and the details of the documentary?
No, let's get into some details of this because there's some stuff that I think is just going to come up naturally.
Yeah, so I took a bunch of notes. I don't know if you did on the series itself.
I didn't really need to.
Yeah, so...
and for the record, I finished watching it today.
Right.
I watched 2 episodes before the football game last night, and then watched the last 2 episodes today.
Yeah.
At like lunchtime.
Oh, I binged them all yesterday afternoon. I'm like, all right, I should probably sit down and watch these because I know we were going to talk about it for the show.
I should have done it all at once. Take my kick in the nuts all at once.
Right. Well, 10 minutes into the first episode, I'm like, I'm in. Like, I don't want to do anything else but finish this fucking series right now. So, and they hook you right from the start, right? They hook you by starting to introduce you to the concept of the teacher flight, right? They talk about the lack of interest in the space shuttle program by the American public already, throwing the teacher on there. And then it gets real dramatic with, some of this behind the scenes talking about how NASA knew this was going to happen. Engineers knew it was going to explode. And then they show you the footage of the explosion.
Right.
And then boom, cut off, intro music.
Yeah.
So
J.J. Abrams
just fuck at his finest.
Yeah.
Just grabbing your attention right from the start. Then we go back. Then it backtracks to the beginning of the space shuttle program, back to the 70s, when fucking Nixon approved, the budget for the space shuttle program, right? Because they're talking, all right, for years we fucking use these one-time use fucking space vehicles. Let's try to reuse this shit, and that's the whole concept behind it, right? Is you got these solid rocket boosters, they launch the fucking shuttle into space, you reuse the boosters, shuttle lands like a normal fucking airplane.
Right.
It's all good in the hood. And I think it was very early on in this episode too, they showed that first shuttle landing, right? The first
They showed Columbia landing.
Columbia, yeah, which was the first, of the new shuttles to take off in 81.
Right.
So that was really cool. And honestly, a lot of this was new to me because I was just not that familiar with the space shuttle program. Here's how little I knew about this. I was under the impression for years that every time a space shuttle launched and we were sending people into space, they were going to the moon. Like, I had no idea they were just going up to just hang out in orbit, launch fucking satellites, do all that stuff. I just thought every time we fucking lifted off from Earth, we were going to the moon.
Do you remember Space Lab at all?
No.
Sidebar. But it's not going to go very far if you don't remember what Space Lab is.
No. Space
Lab was like an intermediary thing. They used the Saturn V rocket to launch, and basically it was a space station, albeit small. I mean, there's a version of it in the Air and Space Museum in Washington.
Okay.
Where you can actually kind of walk in and look what the crew compartment would look at. It looked like a large something that would fit into the cargo bay of the shuttle. Mm-hmm. And they threw it up there, and there was stuff. A lot of this was really. It was kind of before my time, where I was really into it. So most of the information I got from it was kind of after the fact. Mm-hmm. But it was interagency cooperation with, or not interagency, but with the Russians. Where there was Russians and Americans that were on the Space Lab, and there was all these things. Another win for NASA, right? Mm-hmm. I forget where I was going with that because you're talking like that. I forget where I was going to go with that. I was
basically just talking about me just not being that familiar.
Every time we went to space, we were going to the moon, and I don't think that your experience is necessarily you are probably the majority, honestly, with people that think about what the shuttle is doing and how deep into space the shuttle is actually going. Because people don't realize it's not an interplanetary fucking spaceship. Right. It's not fucking Star Trek. Yep. Which I think a lot of people would make that same parallel.
Indeed. So, so they start talking about this new class of astronauts that they're bringing up, right? They talked about how every astronaut up to this point was just for lack of a better term, straight white man, right? It was all white dudes up to this point. They're like, we gotta diversify a little bit. You gotta diversify your bones. So, they decided to bring up this new class of, I think they called it the class of 80 or 79 or...
78.
78, class of 78. And it was the TFNGs, the 35 new guys.
Right.
And it included, a handful of females and some minorities. They played this news report, and I wrote this down verbatim because I have to read this. I'm like, so, how earlier on in the episode we were talking about, political correctness and, laughing at people like that? Hearing this made even me cringe. But I'm just going to read this verbatim from this fucking news report because they were talking about this new class of astronaut, the class of 78, and the guy says, NASA has chosen who will ride the shuttle out to space and back in the 1980s. Among them are 3 blacks, 1 Oriental, and 6 women.
Yes, they used those words. So ironically, the only bit of this, because this was right in the beginning.
Yeah.
So when I had to turn this on, Kathy came down and we were going to try and watch it together, but I think for her it was maybe a little too much. But she was there for that, and she's like, "Wow." I'm like, "Yeah, wow." Could you fucking imagine? And this is 1978. This wasn't that fucking long ago, but
no, it was in our lifetimes.
And it talks about even what was going on in the times. It was with poor race relations and all the protesting and stuff like that. Very reminiscent of it's the kind of the cycle we're going through now. Yeah. But the just boom, this is the language we're using.
Yeah. And just hearing him just say it, just so blatant. And among them are 3 blacks, 1 Oriental, and 6 women. Fuck. Even that made me feel uncomfortable. So
yeah, and let's. I don't want to. I guess it's going to sound defensive, but in reality, when you're talking about the Apollo space program and all the space program, everything that was going on previously, they were selecting highly educated aviators, test pilots, engineers, people that were they wanted them to be able to fucking run systems within the spacecraft, and basically be the overwatching everything that was going on and be able to have the intricate knowledge required to run different experiments. These guys were geologists. Like they turned into geologists when they sent them to the fucking moon, and now they're teaching them what rocks to look for and shit like that. NASA spent time with these guys, all these astronauts that went to the moon. It was like, okay, here, this is what you're going to be looking for rocks and shit. So now they're geologists. So they had a lot of bandwidth, and test pilots by our nation. Now we were both aviators, right? Mm-hmm. So we've interacted personally with some of these personalities with the test pilots, and fuck, I swear to God, that guy was going to kill us the one time. But
oh my God, down in Texas.
Yeah, in Texas. Yeah. Doing their fucking pattern, motherfucker. Anyway,
bank angle.
Yeah, what is happening? Yeah, but we digress. But that type of personality, it's like, okay, they have no fear. There's no amount of information that they can't handle, and they're physically fit and everything else. Not to say that minorities and women weren't at that same time, but the United States Air Force, the United States Navy, where these aviators are coming from, that was the vetting process. It's like, okay, we already have people that we know meet these criteria, and those are the people that went. So now with the space shuttle, it was an opportunity to get more science, run more experiments, have payload specialists, because they're going to be doing so much with satellites and shit like that, where you could diversify a little bit.
Yeah. Now, and I talked about throughout this, a majority of the focus is on the teacher, Krista McCullough, but they get into all of these crew members, and right from the get-go in this first episode, they really go into Ron McNair,
right,
who was the African-American
right
astronaut who was on the Challenger, but they went into some of his history, right, talking as a young boy growing up, going to the library because he wanted to check out some books. And, at the time, black people weren't allowed to check out books from the fucking libraries. It was a big ordeal. And, he still fought, and he, took his education seriously and ended up, being a fucking astronaut, for crying out loud. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, what a shame, because this guy would have been such a great fucking role model for that community.
Yeah.
Super smart, determined fucking guy. Astronaut, I mean, he would have been like the greatest fucking role model for the African American community if his life hadn't gotten cut short.
And in this documentary, it does, as it's humanizing the crew. It talks about his, like, that background, talks about how he was an accomplished saxophone player, and he had all these. There's a spider. Look at that spider.
I saw that. It's kind of hard not to.
Now he's dead.
Of course, now nothing's going to kill the rest of the bugs in here, but whatever.
That thing wasn't big enough to fucking eat anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I can't remember. I feel terrible. I can't remember. But the other African American that was the guy who was actually at Capcom when the shuttle exploded.
Yeah. Because he was doing interviews throughout the whole course of this series.
And that was great, by the way. The documentary getting and talking to the right people in the right moment.
I have one exception to that, because the person that I had some issue with that they talked to was the daughter of the engineer.
Yeah.
I feel like watching this that half the stuff she was saying was probably bullshit.
So it's a valid point, and I got the same impression, and I think it's because she looks like somebody that'd be on reality TV.
Right.
I think, and
she's just cashing in on her dad's whatever level of fame that he had.
At face value, I agree. I had the same impression. Like, the way this woman presents herself, it really seemed like she was advantageous in telling these things.
Yeah, she was there at all those pivotal moments and everything else.
But here's the thing. So for her, right, she talking about her father, who was one of the lead engineers who were working for Trek.
It's two words.
Tachyon. Fuck. Anyway, working for the company that made the solid rocket boosters in Utah. Granted, this is Utah.
Right.
Help me out, people. Like, I think people. Anyway, there's something to be said about Utah there, including that statement.
There's a lot to say about Utah,
but
not much of it's positive.
But this town that was their industry. They made solid rocket boosters, and she worked at the fucking plant. If she did drive in there with her father, she was in a unique position to hear this stuff, because I can put myself in that same position. Like if one of my kids were telling this after the fact,
Yeah.
like the level of consternation that I'd be coming home with, that for things that I knew were wrong. I mean, shit. Just in my experience with dealing with shit with the fucking airplane,
Right.
it's the same. It's the same thing.
And I was going to get into that, especially when we get later on and we talk about, the risk aversion and, trying to make the decision whether or not to launch. We've got a lot of experience in a very similar vein to that.
But yeah, she definitely seemed like she came out of like fucking Dog the Bounty Hunter type thing. And but she was in a position to do that. And as we'll talk about later, there was a lot of engineers that validate what she was saying.
Oh yeah, for sure. So that kind of ended the first episode. Again, they did such a great job of really humanizing the crew, but also in parallel talking about the standing up of the shuttle program and the importance of that. And that continues now when we go into the second episode, because we're dealing with more of the human aspect in conjunction with the solid rocket boosters. They focus a lot on this. And this is when we start talking about the fucking O-rings that connect the sections of the solid rocket boosters together.
Mm-hmm.
So, we start getting montages of, the Krista McAuliffe and her backup doing a lot of the water survival and all. Did you notice too, like a lot of the survival stuff that they did? I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that.
It's the same shit in Pensacola they've been doing for fucking 50 years.
Yep, throwing them in the vomit comet,
right,
and all that stuff, which was a modified Boeing 707, which is what also the KC-135 is made of.
Right.
We both flew on it one point in our careers. So, but yeah, it starts talking about the O-rings, and things start looking serious when they talk about this memo that's sent by one of the engineers, and it's basically just help in big letters, and it's talking about the problems that they're noticing with these O-rings when the rockets are coming down. And they're examining them after the fact, and they're starting to see some burn through on these fucking O-rings,
right?
Because that's what's basically keeping these sections sealed, and it's keeping the fucking flames and fuel and all that shit from like starting to spew through the cracks of the connections.
Yeah, and the documentary, making the technology level more palatable, talks about the solid rocket boosters. Like once they're ignited, they're going to run.
Yeah.
There's nothing that can stop that reaction. Because think of it more like a firecracker.
Right.
And once you light a firecracker off, it's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the same thing with these. So the engineering feat to control this level of explosion, basically, through nozzle, like I could do a fucking lecture series about von Braun and fucking rockets technology and all that other fucking shit, right? But this is with these solid rocket boosters, it's the reality of reusing these things. And at the end of this, I want to talk about how this relates to things today as we're talking about reusable rockets and shit like that.
There was an article today, actually, about SpaceX.
Yeah, because they scrubbed another, there was another scrub. But as they were taking these things out of the Atlantic Ocean and taking them apart to basically service them, they put them back into production. And they're inspecting these areas and finding, like, you had 2 O-rings per one of those sections, and like one of them would deteriorate to the point where it would start taking out the other one.
Yeah. And
that's when these memorandums started coming out, like, hey, we really need to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
Those conversations were happening a year before Challenger.
Yeah. And, at the same time, the NASA people are under pressure to have these continuous launches, right? Because they need the PR.
Right.
So these heads of NASA who aren't part of the engineering, they're more part of the management, operations, and all of that. They're under pressure to keep this ball rolling. I think they talked about the year Challenger went up. They were supposed to have 12 or 20 launches that year.
Yeah, it was
some astronomical number.
It was a ridiculous number. Like even back in those days, it just like yeah, from the expectation of what the shuttle was supposed to be doing and the amount of work it was supposed to do to be able to pay it. Like the idea was, and they talk about it in episode 1, is the shuttle was supposed to pay for itself, right?
Right.
Flying fucking tractor trailer, space tractor trailer, where you go up there, they fucking put cargo out there, do their thing, come back down. People would pay them to take their shit up, it'll pay for itself.
Right. Which, by the way, that was another part of the article that I read today about SpaceX doing that exact same thing, taking satellites up. But I digress. Another thing from this episode that I thought was kind of funny was, did you notice Ralphie?
Yes. I had no idea that he was anything involving NASA.
Yeah.
Like, and the fact that it's him, it's Ralphie
Yeah.
in the fucking stands. Like, so 83, I think they said, is when Christmas Story came out.
Somewhere around there.
And then, so you're talking about 86 when he's part of this young astronaut program. And the fact that he was talking about conversations were being had, okay, you start with a teacher, then the next thing you know, you're gonna have a kid.
Yeah.
Up in the shuttle.
NASA was like, yeah, we'll fucking take journalists up, we'll take teachers, we'll take kids.
Yeah.
Fuck it.
And apparently, and honestly, this is something I didn't know about the shuttle program, when they were putting fucking senators and shit.
Yeah, that was news to me. Apparently, they had already done that.
Yeah, twice.
Yeah.
I had no idea. And the fact that I wish I'm so horrible with the names, but I think it was Scobie's wife was saying how, or no, it was Jarvis. I think Jarvis's wife was saying how this one senator had bumped him.
Yep.
Twice, or he got bumped at one time. Then this one senator bumped him again.
Yep.
He got to go, which put Jarvis on this shuttle mission, and ultimately cost him his life. Mm-hmm. And he showed up, kind of post-mortem while they were still trying to figure out everything that's going on. And he showed up to help console families and shit like that. Yeah. And she was like, she left the room. She's like, I can't, you can't possibly fathom having to sit there and watch that.
Oh yeah.
Right.
No way you can put yourself into that position.
Because I don't know when we talk about this anyway, but this puts me in a mindset of, I never really thought about it this way before until watching this. But the mindset of the wives, the parents, and everyone that was there to watch this thing, knowing full well that this is not, NASA's like, all right, this is safe. Even Krista McAuliffe, at some point, just put her faith in NASA that everything was going to be fine.
Yeah, because the reporters were asking, are you scared? She's like, no, I know that they're safe. They take safety very seriously.
All right, and probably on the outside, that's 100% right. And now put yourself in a family's position where they have that same sensation, and then something like this happens. I immediately, because you can't help as a human, fucking, all right, what if, for us, right, we go out, we go do something fucking dangerous, because there is a huge amount of risk. Mm-hmm. And if that happens, they can't see it. It's the only thing that they're going to know is that something bad happened. Right. And then, it wasn't live on fucking television with millions of viewers. They weren't standing there in the cold watching it happen. Yeah. And then having to watch it over and over and over again. I can't imagine. Yeah. I can't imagine that. And it did. That human element, I was like, man, if anything had happened to me, it would have been... Yeah, there's not going to be any video evidence, and if there is, it's not going to be like that. Right. And you're not certainly not going to have to fucking turn on the news and watch it every day.
No. So that's something that I don't think any of us can ever really comprehend what those families went through at that point. Yeah. So, but you do mention the watching of the launch. One of the last scenes of this second episode is Krista and her backup watching the Challenger launch in October of 85. Yeah. So 4 months before they launch, Challenger went up for another mission. And they were there in Florida, and they watched it, and they're cheering, and everything was fucking cool in the gang, right? So why would they have any reason to believe that theirs was going to go wrong?
Sure. Because I don't... That was perfect for NASA. Right, perfect if you're going to, hey, public, here's a successful thing, and this is going to make you give all the warm fuzzy that, hey, this happened once, it'll happen again, everything will work fine, no problem whatsoever. Meanwhile, all this discussion's happening behind the scenes about critical aspects of this fucking thing.
Yeah.
That is it the second episode or the third episode where we talk about the waiver?
That's the third episode.
All right.
Yeah. That we ended the second episode, so the third one, that's when we start getting into some of the real shit. One of the first scenes is how they talked about one of the pilots briefed Krista and her backup like, this is more serious than you might realize.
Right. This is not a commercial jetliner.
Whereas everybody else in NASA and even the media were just trying to be like, yeah, it's just like a commercial air flight, whatever.
Right.
And he's like, no, not exactly.
Yeah, because he had asked his wife. He's like, hey, should I tell her?
Yeah.
Should I tell them how dangerous this really is? Mm-hmm. And his wife was like, yeah, you should.
Because they have a right to know.
And then they did. And then he did. And you know what? That's exactly what you would expect. Mm-hmm. You know, Scobie was an Air Force pilot. That level of risk and going through those things, you absolutely, like, you're going to go to the crew and be like, yeah, okay, this is how much of a shit show this could potentially be.
Mm-hmm. And, you and I have sat in on those briefings. Obviously not nearly as life-threatening, but, like, if shit goes wrong, this could be bad.
And if you had the wrong person in there, because we've flown with the wrong people, and when the wrong person is there downplaying everything, and you're sitting in the back like a fucking mushroom in the dark, it's not, something's wrong. Yeah. You know that it could be worse, but you're just not hearing it. So it's really difficult to be oblivious. Unless you're like some people that we've encountered in our flying careers where it's just like, bloop, ignorance is truly bliss, and they don't fucking have any idea that the near death that's going to happen, or it has almost happened.
And I know exactly who you're talking about.
Just that level of fucking oblivion where you could just be like, you could sit there in the worst possible scenario, like you are you are a cunt hair away from fucking death at any given moment, and you're gonna sit there and fucking eat your box lunch, or fucking.
Oh, did you see something?
Did you see lightning? Did you see lightning? As we're in a thunderstorm, for fucking 10 minutes, with St. Elmo's fire in the fucking airplane, and the fucking co-pilot on the fucking HF radio screaming at African controllers, trying to get us the fuck out of there, getting the shit kicked out of us, and this motherfucker comes on the intercom. That level of oblivion. That's not what you want. You want somebody like this crew and this aircraft commander that was like, hey, listen, this is the level of risk. Yep. This is what you're getting yourself into.
Yep, and then, we get some more parallels to our aviation career because you talk about the launch issues, because now we're getting close to the actual launch. Mm-hmm. It was supposed to happen one night, Sunday night, I think it was. And they had projected thunderstorms in the area.
Right.
Can't take off in inclement weather, so they canceled. And they pushed it off a day. Apparently, the storms didn't actually come as projected either. So
yeah, the storms they were talking about showed up like hours after the projected liftoff.
Yep. And then the next day, I think it was. Oh, was it that when the door fucking shut right and the screw stripped out?
These motherfuckers. So that shit draws direct parallel to almost every aviator at some point, right? Mm-hmm. Where you talk about how there's this infinite divide between maintenance, between a maintainer and a pilot, right? A crew member. Because as maintainers, we were both in this position. We've both been on both sides of this fucking table. Mm-hmm. And as maintainers, you're like, whatever I need to do to fucking get this thing off the ground, that's what we're going to do. Up to and including fucking getting a goddamn hacksaw and hacking through a fucking bolt to be able to get this fucking door latch to get secured ultimately, which they couldn't do. Had to scrub the whole fucking thing, and go into the next day. And then I think you're getting ready to talk about it when, like, okay, this shit's going on. Here's the next day where it's going to be fucking insanely cold.
Yeah, like overnight temperatures dropping into the teens. Something unprecedented.
It's like 22 degrees, I think they said it was going to be the low.
Yeah, which, I mean, in Florida, like, that's
and
fucking insane.
And to give the viewer, and again for this documentary, to give the viewer that perspective, they talk about, hey, here's the citrus crops, because we've run into this, and later in our lives when Florida's had this insane cold spell and fucking fruit crops and everything else, and you talk about the hits to the economy and all that shit. They actually, one of the CNN fucking reporters, they're like, hey, they're not going to fucking launch anyway, so go over and cover this story about the fucking citrus groves that they're lighting fucking big butane shits to fucking try and keep the shit warm.
Yep. And this was when shit started getting real, because the O-rings was still a problem, and some of these engineers are like, look, this is only going to be worse because this rubber is getting cold and it's not going to seal as well.
Right.
Or something to that effect. Like the effect of the cold on these rubber fucking seals.
It's about the and it's the Feinheim talks about, does the demonstration later about it.
During the hearings.
Right. So it's the pliability, like as it's cold and it's it squeezes and that changes. It retains its shape. It doesn't go back into the shape it's supposed to be. Yes. Which obviously, if you take a seal, you make it smaller. And then if that doesn't have enough time to warm up, it's going to stay small and it's going to leak.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get to the demonstration between the general and what's his nuts? Feynman, right?
I didn't take note of all those people's names.
Yeah.
Sorry. And then we get into this big heated discussion between fucking NASA and the contractors, and can't hear me at all? Fucking hell.
So
sorry, guys.
While he's resetting that, yeah. So before we even get to that point, there's a point where you have the people internally to the people who are building the solid rocket booster. They're having internal discussions about this recovery. They're already concerned about
how about now?
About the solid rocket boosters. And then they get to a point where it's like, okay, now add this cold element to it.
Right.
Like, well, fuck. And they said, engineers came out and said, shouldn't be doing this below 53 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this is part of that conference call you're alluding to, where they're with the NASA administrator. This is the middle of the fucking night.
Yeah.
A bunch of dudes sitting around a fucking conference room talking about the risks that you're taking with other people's lives.
Yep. And basically trying to decide, should we launch or not, when most of your engineers at this point are like, no.
Right. And I think that the telling part of that was he was a vice president in charge of the engineers, and he was sitting at the table as a manager, and that he was told specifically, you need to take off your engineer hat and put on your manager hat.
Right.
The fact is, dude, when they're talking about this shit, I'm like, I've seen this happen. I've personally seen this happen with decisions that were like, you're saying something and you're forcing somebody to make a decision. They're talking about the NASA administrator basically made it feel in the room like you were going to have to prove that this thing wasn't going to fail, or you were going to have to prove that it fucking was going to fail.
Yeah, like your presentation wasn't good enough to convince me.
You have to convince me that this thing is going to fail if we do this. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, your data doesn't support it. And because he was pushing it that direction, now people start changing. Like, well, maybe we are being too conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And they start thinking about it, except for the fucking the engineers that were like, dude, no, this is fucked. Really? And you sit in rooms like this. And I've had to do it with the fucking jet. I had multiple times in Greenville.
Yeah.
And DC, where you're sitting in a room and you're one of the smartest people in that room. And people are making decisions based on shit fucking logic without the right fucking data, when they have the right data, and still choose to ignore it so they can make a decision based on what they want to believe.
Right.
This happens so much more often than you fucking realize, and the fact that they're doing with something to this degree just shows the gigantic fucking balls that NASA was pushing around in a fucking wheelbarrow at this point. Which it's not even a failure to imagine it, because the engineers fucking imagined the shit out of it.
Yeah.
And they fucking gave them data to prove it.
Yep.
But because NASA was so pushing on them to say, you have to make a decision that's going to allow us to launch. And it forced this guy to do it. So they fucking get him, the administrator, the NASA administrator, I think he was in charge of the Marshall Space Center, and I can't remember his name right now. But he was like, after that vice president and the engineer said, you know what, you're right, we don't have the data to support that this is going to happen.
Yeah, after he basically got strong-armed into
exactly
acquiescing.
And then he's like, okay, well, you need to put that in writing. So he forces the contractor to put it in fucking writing, and basically, once that's in writing, homeboy signs a fucking waiver. He signs a waiver that says, like, yes, this is what this potential could happen, but I'm going to put my John Hancock on this fucking waiver saying we accept this level of risk.
Yeah.
And this is where it comes into the conversation, like how many times in our Air Force careers where we have this risk management structure that it didn't matter where you were. It was a joke. It was a fucking joke because whatever the number was like, oh yeah, 15 low caution. Right? Yeah. every fucking time you go out there and flew, didn't matter what the weather was or anything else, it was always in this low caution area.
Yeah.
Why is that? Well, it's because we have to get training done. People have currencies to maintain. People have places to go.
Yep.
This level of visibility has to happen with this mission, which means that we're going to accept a higher level of risk.
Yeah.
And what frustrated me the most, I guess, was the fact that the crew was completely outside of that fucking risk chain. Right.
Yeah, because that's the difference in our careers versus what's happening in this. The crew is not in any of these meetings, whereas as the air crew, it was us sitting down with maintenance or whoever and going over all these numbers.
Dick Scobie didn't put his John Hancock on there saying he was accepting this level of risk with all this information. He didn't have all this information.
Because, if they had been in on these meetings and they had heard these engineers express these fucking concerns, they probably would have been like, go fuck yourselves. Find somebody else to fly your shuttle.
And honestly, in the Apollo program, it's very well documented that the astronauts, because of their level of knowledge and knowing how the fucking machine worked, would go there and stop something.
Yeah.
And tell them that they're not going to accept the level of risk. Whereas the crew in this situation, granted, this is a documentary about the people, not necessarily talking about that, but when you're talking about the level of risk that was assumed here and signing waivers and shit like that, you would think that they would, if the crew was involved in it at all, that they would at least been briefed in on that.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that you're fucking going out to a launch pad with icicles all over it, that you have to delay the launch 2 hours to fucking break up the fucking ice.
Yeah, which is
on the fucking launch pad.
Jesus.
Like, again, time after time where you look at it, and common sense would tell you, well, we're not going to go.
Yeah.
There's no way. Like, fucking Scobie told his wife.
Yeah, he said, we're not going.
Yeah, we're not going. It's fucking, it's fucking 20 degrees outside. It's fucking freezing.
CNN's going to cover the crops,
Yeah, there's no way. So the fucking...
And this is what we kind of learned about as like a chain of events, right? That lead up to an incident, because it really was.
Right.
Because had they taken off that Sunday night, had they taken off that next day, had the fucking hatch not had that problem, they might all still be alive. Somebody else might have fucking died later on when this happened again, but I'd like to think at least that it was the cold weather is what put that, that O-ring over the edge and is what caused that breach. Maybe they could have figured out a way to stop it before then, but unfortunately, just a shitty series of events throwing in weather and then human factors into it, all combined into this fucking disaster.
Well, and something to remember too, again, based on our experience, if you have something that keeps working despite the fact that there's indications that there's something wrong, but it continues to work time after time.
Yeah.
Had they launched, again, based on what this engineer, fucking homegirl's father was saying as an engineer, that it was just inevitable that it was going to fucking blow up. Yeah. You're not going to pay to change the engineering unless something catastrophic happens.
True.
That's what happened with Apollo 1.
Yeah.
How did Apollo 1 had to kill 3 people in order to change things like the oxygen environment, some of the flammables that were in the fucking in the space capsule, shit like that. That's the only reason that shit changed was because somebody died.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with this. Like, until there was a fatality or there was something catastrophic had happened, they're not going to spend that. How many millions of dollars would it take? Yeah, remember how much it costs to do engineering changes just on our weapon system?
Oh yeah.
Like tens of thousands of dollars for somebody who think about a change
and time too.
Yeah.
That's
You're basically, for something like this, and what the engineers were talking about when they're talking about the documentary is they should have grounded the fucking fleet until they figured this out and knew with certainty that this was not going to be at this next level of risk. Because they obviously could do it, right?
Yeah.
When they launched the shuttles again, they make a point at the end of the series to talk about there was never another incident with the solid rocket booster. Because they did all right, we saw this failure, we were able to account for it and engineer to make sure that it wasn't going to fail.
Yeah. So to end this episode, it built up to the point of the launch. We rewatched the launch again, and explosion happens. They're focusing on the families in the stands, and then over the loudspeaker, like somebody says the vehicle has exploded. Again, we're like 120 seconds after the fucking launch, and now a voice is coming over the speaker saying the vehicle exploded.
Well, and what's funny too is like it seems so heartless, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, and it's just one of those things where like you're stating the obvious,
right?
But
I mean, some people didn't quite realize what was going on at first either.
The people they had the testimony. They talked to people in interviews who were like, I never saw a launch before, so I didn't know that this was out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
Until I started seeing people react. Mm-hmm. That silence that was so deafening after the explosion as the debris is falling and everything else.
Yeah. And the episode 4 started with that home video footage. Some old guy in fucking Florida has got his, old school fucking camera and he's filming the launch like, you getting it? Yeah, I'm getting it. And then you see the fucking, the two solid rocket boosters kind of break off and he's like, yeah, I think there's a problem.
Yeah. That looks like a problem? That looks like a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was wild. I'd never seen that footage before.
Neither have I. Neither have I. I mean, and there was, I will say for the documentary, it didn't kill us with so many, like, it wasn't like watching the JFK. Or whatever. So,
back and to the left.
Exactly.
Over and over and over again.
It didn't kill us with that.
No,
that
thankfully.
Imagery.
Because it didn't have to. Because at this point, like I said, because they had focused so much on the human aspect. I knew more about Kristen McAuliffe after watching the first 3 episodes than I did in, the past 30 years before that. You get into real detail, you get into this human factor. By the time the credits start rolling, or the opening music starts rolling in this 4th episode, like, I can feel tears running down my fucking cheeks.
Yeah.
And, I have some up and downs, and then by the end of this fucking episode, dude, I was a fucking mess. So I'm glad Kristen was at work and the boys were all, off doing something because
nobody got to see you.
Yeah, no, man, the emotions were running pretty high throughout the whole course of this, and this last episode is more about the aftermath, right?
Right.
The hearings, the investigations, Reagan's address to the nation.
Yeah. I put it in the notes. I remember that. I remember seeing Reagan sitting there, sitting in the living room watching this, and because that was all day. It was just you just sat in front of the television and watched. You watched Tom Brokaw fucking, say things, and when the president came on and started with his whole speech for the evening, and then the line where he says, "We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them. This morning, as they prepared their journey and waved goodbye." And slip the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God. That him sitting there saying that is how I remember Ronald Reagan.
Yeah,
like I was too young to know politics.
Yep, same here.
Reagan, this was the Cold War. This is the end of the Cold War and things, those types of things. And I remember things about that. But what I remember most about Ronald Reagan, and it's probably why I don't have like a real negative thing in my head about Ronald Reagan, is because of this.
Yeah.
It seemed like the most appropriate and most touching thing to say. And when I saw him say it on this documentary, it hit me the same way. Like it just fucking flushed it right back out of me.
Yeah.
Like as that feeling is like it was the right thing. It was the right thing to say.
Yep. And that was supposed to be the State of the Union that night.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, we're not doing that. I just want to talk about the Challenger and what happened. And yeah, it was a great talk. Then we got into all the hearings about the O-rings. A lot of engineers, thank God, started coming forward about the O-ring concerns, because it seemed like NASA was more than willing to just kind of try to push this under the rug a little bit, maybe throw all the blame on the fucking engineers, try to absolve themselves of any responsibility.
Yeah, and it was interesting, like the whole with the former Secretary of State that Reagan had put in charge of it. And
yeah.
If you're to believe what was said, with Reagan's implication was like, listen, we need to keep launching. We need to keep our space program going.
Mm-hmm.
Try your best to make NASA, come out of this okay.
Yeah.
Which again, 100% believe that from a political element that's what happened.
Sure. Yeah.
And then you had a guy who was trying to give NASA the benefit of the doubt, and NASA being on national television lying. Just flat out lying about what they knew.
Mm-hmm.
Putting a fucking public affairs guy at a desk, and they have an image of a fucking fire coming out of an inappropriate place to the rocket booster, and he calls it an inadvertent plume.
Yeah, an additional plume or something like that. Yeah.
It's like, you mean the flame shooting out of the side of this? Like, no. They're characterizing this as this.
Yeah.
Like, and so much covering of asses. This was the episode 2, and it started in episode 3 where you had the one guy, and I should have wrote down the names. And
are you talking about that old fuck who was kind of the one who coerced the... Yeah.
Who stood there in his fucking suit, this old man, and basically was like, if I had all the information that I had then and even know it was going to happen, I'd still make the same decision.
Yeah, that fucking guy, because...
that's how you have to live with yourself?
And maybe that's the only way he can, because if he, looked at it objectively, he'd probably realize he's directly responsible for all of those people being dead.
Because other people that were involved in this did. You saw these men that had the opportunity to try and stop this, but didn't.
Yep.
And you could see it. You could, the one thing this documentary does really well, as it's humanizing people, is the people that were in the room having engineering conversations, the managers and those types of people. You could tell, some of those older guys, you could tell the one jackwagon who fucking refused to fucking basically acknowledge that he killed those people. Yeah. That he was the guy that he would make that decision again. He had presented it a certain way, but the other guys, the one guy who he was barely shaved, he looked half dead, and he just was you could tell at these later stages of these men's lives that they've had to carry this burden with them for 40 years.
Yeah, and you can tell it's eating them up inside, which, I mean, it's good. They should feel some level of guilt about this. I mean, it shouldn't, completely destroy their lives, but at the same time, they need to remember what the fuck happened. But that one same asshole had a quote in here, too, where he basically tried to justify it, in the means of sacrifices for the greater good of humanity, right? Yeah. Which, in the early days of the space program, that made a lot of sense. You talk about the Apollo 1, and, had we lost the crew of the Apollo 13, it would have been the same story. This was all for the progress of humanity. This was different. Because you were just being blatantly negligent, or you just didn't fucking care, so you can meet a schedule.
Well, you're rationalizing your decision making, and that's, I guess that's what he had to do to fucking live with himself.
Yeah,
that's the only thing I think of to have that level of arrogance about it. Mm-hmm. Because even there was levels of NASA administrators that were just that. It affected them. People that had stepped down, gone on other positions.
Yeah.
And there were some people that, when Discovery launched, what you saw as you kind of flipped the script and the hearings are over and now they're making the changes and getting right people in the right spots and addressing these things. And then 2 years later, when Discovery launches...
because they made a big deal about that in this.
Right.
And it was, again, very emotional, but at the same time, everybody was on edge at this point.
Oh, yeah. For me, having watched that, because I watched that launch, It was more about getting. It was the moment. Go for throttle up.
Yeah.
Like those words for me, like that's the key. Like even now, like because I've seen that fucking footage so many times, and you hear those voices, and that after they said that, and you got past that moment, then it was kind of like, okay,
Yeah, could breathe a little bit easier at that point.
And then for another decade and a half, we had shuttle launches until 2003 with the Columbia incident.
Which, quite frankly, I don't know any of the details about that. I remember that happening. Hell, one of the guys that I worked with at the Guard worked for NASA as his real job. You know him, Bob, one of the Bobs. Anyway.
One of the Bobs.
Yeah, that worked for the avionics shop over in the 108.
Fuss? Not Fuss. Fuss was a FAA guy.
Yeah, no, one other guy. Anyway, I digress. But yeah, I'd love to do some research and find out exactly what happened with Columbia and why that happened.
But and they're talking about it in the chat how that somehow you would think that level of arrogance would not affect what happened. Like when nothing like that would be able to happen again, and yet with Columbia, it's a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah.
It's that arrogance of like, okay, we've done this many times, we're really good at this, nothing could possibly go wrong, and then ignoring all of the things, all the people that said that something bad is going to happen, ignoring that fact.
Yeah.
And it happens.
So one of the last notes that I have on here is another remark made by Reagan. I think this was as they were, reorganizing NASA and putting new people in, and it was basically the Yoda speech from The Last Jedi about failure is the greatest teacher. Right. And it feels like he said that exact same speech word for word as he's given another address as they're talking about moving forward. I think this was even like leading up to the Discovery launch later on.
Yeah,
but
I forget the timing.
But yeah, either way, it was a really interesting quote because he again talked about how we had failures but we have to learn from them and
that's how you present that information, not the like, oh, people have to die in order to advance, like,
right?
That's not no, because at some point people have to know. That's what kills me about this whole thing, like watching it more recently, like and thinking about it like to that detail more recently. The fact that the crew really didn't know. They at some point, if you went and told Dick Scobie like, okay, this has potential for this, and then does he accept that level of risk?
Right.
Probably not.
I would imagine not.
He'd been in space before, right? And let's face it, for some people, like the pilot, there was only 3 out of that 7-member crew, only 3 of them had not been in space already.
Yeah.
And you wonder with you get it with new aircraft commanders, right? When you're out there flying around and you get the new guy who's never done something before, and he has this just want to get it, like, oh well, I have to get this done. We're gonna move forward. We're gonna press.
Yeah.
And a more experienced person, somebody who's done it once before, would go like, no, we're not. Yeah. We're not going to do that. That's dumb. And you have that. Like almost every time we've ever flown, there's that decision process that's happening that at least we're a part of, even if we believed it. That we
actually had a say in it.
I think sometimes we're like, even despite our fucking our qualms, we still went, but we also weren't the fucking guy. We weren't the aircraft commanders. For us, it was just like, here's our level of expertise. It's going to help you do this. And oh, by the way, I'm not fucking doing it. Fuck you.
Yeah. So and I saw you wrote notes about this. They didn't really touch on it too much in the documentary, but reading some of the Wikipedia articles and some other stuff talking about the state of the crew and how long were they really alive for.
This was a big thing.
Yeah.
This is a big thing, and it was a big thing maybe a decade afterwards, maybe a decade or more. when some of the audio of post breakup that they were actually able to get audio
Really?
post breakup, and it's not like it's enough. Like for me, you just as you bring it up, like I'm like this, just oof, overcomes me. But there, it really makes you wonder. It makes you wonder if they had thought that this was something like this could happen, that maybe you get to the area of the debris field sooner. Maybe you can do something.
Right.
The water was only 100 feet deep. The impact forces into the water most likely had killed them. But the reality is that they were probably alive. I mean, you want to believe that they fucking exploded and they never knew it.
Mm-hmm.
But the worst case scenario, and the one that's most likely, is that they survive the explosion and the impact into the ocean from 10 miles up.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're immolating whatever was happening inside. I can tell you that I've watched a lot of aircraft accidents, right? This is the nexus of what my degree is in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
plus, I mean, we were inundated with that stuff anyway, just doing what we were doing.
Yeah. So, listening to somebody die, basically, on the radio as aviators, is one of those things where you can't help but, again, put yourself in those positions, and you really. I'm glad the documentary didn't get into it, because it gave you you could see the wives and the family members of the crew members, and it gives you a sense of that. All right, this was done for them. Once they had the memorial service and these things happen, and I put the I've been to Arlington. I've seen the several times. Yeah, I think I was there in Arlington when they put the marker out for the crew.
Yeah.
I think I saw it like that year, to be honest.
No shit.
My dad worked down there all the time. He worked in D.C. all the time, so there was a lot of opportunities to go down there. But the fact that the documentary doesn't really get into that it kind of makes you feel like, okay, there was some finality for the people. However, it does allude to the fact that when they found the remains, that to me, I think it opened just a little bit of a window into like a question in the documentary. Like, me knowing what I know, because I followed it so closely, like it seemed obvious to me. I don't know that anybody else would have picked it up, but when they were talking to Scobie's wife and they talked about getting the remains, because she seemed like she had the best handle on the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, she was kind of the focal point of, look, she was a military wife and had been through all this and been through all the astronaut bullshit.
And all the Botox keeps her eyes wide open.
Yeah, right, with her painted on eyebrows.
Yeah. That was very distracting, by the way.
Reminds me of Mascanada a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I was thinking that.
Yeah. It's a joke, people. Calm down.
Yeah, and Dragon Buddy is, he says it in here, most people are way better off not hearing the audio, and I 100% agree with that.
Is it that bad?
Yes.
Fuck.
100% agree with it.
And it's funny, though, because I didn't even know it existed. Yeah. So, and you would think that this would be sort of national news.
It was national news.
Really?
It was when they first got this audio, and I'd have to do more research because it's just something it's a memory, but there's no timestamp on it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a thing. You didn't have to be fucking balls deep into NASA shit to have heard about this.
Yeah,
they kept it pretty low key. They talked about getting audio and some of this other stuff. I don't know if it was based on a declassification or
maybe just a leak. Like, maybe it was something they never wanted to get out.
Maybe. Maybe. It wasn't Because what's weird to think about, like, so this is January 20th, 1986, right?
Yeah.
10 years later, you and I were going into the military.
Fuck, that's right. Yeah.
10 years later.
Wow.
And talking about the documentary, just to like kind of pull back and just look at what J.J. Abrams did with this, you forget that J.J. worked on this.
Yeah.
Right. And he obviously, for him to do something like this, there must have been some personal relationship to it.
Oh, sure.
You know,
because he's our age, you know.
He's a Gen Xer. He's super, like, we know he's a Star Wars guy. And he's been super
Star Trek, and
so he probably had similar backgrounds. I mean, the space shuttle was fucking fun. It had space shuttle toys and the idea of going to space.
Yeah.
And being a crew member, going to space and flying on something that, quite frankly, it looks like a fucking airplane.
Yeah.
You know, as growing up and when I worked at American Airlines back when I was, 18-year-old fucking dumb shit and throwing bags around, the DC-9, if you look at the fuselage structure of the front of the DC-9, it looks very, very similar to the space shuttle.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with the contractor and everything else, and just the way the windows are set up and everything else. And every time I'd see a DC-9, I'd fucking think about it. I'd think about the fucking space shuttle now. I remember I used to work for ValueJet.
Right.
At one point, that was one of my side jobs.
Right. No, I remember those stories.
We can talk about the ValueJet crash in another time, but the yeah, it's, I forget where I was going with that. Fuck.
Talking about the families and how this was JJ doing it.
Oh, JJ, yeah. The timing of it is interesting. Right? So here we are. They're releasing in September of 2020.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the anniversary of the Challenger explosion.
No, 34th anniversary.
Yeah, it's seemingly innocuous, right? So it's not something that they were trying to like make a big money grab for. It's like,
right.
It really makes you wonder, like, why now?
Well, I mean, it's not like these people are getting any younger, right?
Facts.
So, and they, like you said at the beginning of this episode, they got all of the right people who had firsthand knowledge of this, to include Krista McAuliffe's backup. She was a constant throughout this.
Which is a great perspective. I never even thought. I knew she went to space because Jen Morgan, she went to space.
Yeah, later. This was like in 07 or something like that.
Yeah,
so
she went in a much later crew.
Yeah.
But yeah, she got to go and do that. I remember when that was going on.
Yeah.
But I forgot, that she was there step for step.
Right, because they had to have the stand-in basically in case Krista couldn't make it for whatever reason. And again, like you said, the main wife of the pilot, a couple of the wives of some of the pilots, and just all the people that were involved, those engineers, those fucking head guys from NASA who were probably days away from dropping fucking dead. So it was a good time when you could still get all of these people's perspectives.
Yeah.
On what happened,
and get them at a point in their lives when they're willing to be free with this information.
Right,
there's no retribution. Like, what are they going to do to them now in their advanced ages? Right.
Yeah, they don't work for NASA anymore. There's no. Yeah,
and it's interesting too. There's so many just really good elements to this where they had I think his name is Covey. He was the aircraft commander that went on the Discovery mission, the next one in 88. And he was on console for he's the one that said go with throttle.
Right, and then when you see his jaw drop and
that footage there, this documentary does a great job of collecting footage that there's no way you've ever seen before.
Yeah.
And somebody who's super into it, there's a lot of shit that I never saw before.
Yeah.
Crystal clear fucking images. I mean, obviously some of it was grainy, like news type stuff.
Sure.
Because it was fucking 1986, right?
Yeah.
But I think the presentation was excellent. This is JJ's. Hang on. This is some of JJ's best work that you'll never. If you're not a Star Wars fan or you don't know this guy, you'd have no idea like why this guy's important.
Yeah.
Like he just did. This is a documentary. This is something he worked on. And he must have been passionate about. I'd love to hear more about.
Yeah, just like
his perspective.
Talk to JJ about his experience with this and everything else. And
like what was compelling to do this. And like you said, people aren't getting any younger.
Yeah.
But I was teeing that up to go into more about what's going on currently. Right, here we are in 2020. We've, since the shuttle had been decommissioned in 2011,
Yep.
we had our first American launch with humans since the last shuttle flight.
Yeah.
And that was with SpaceX. And this kind of like rekindled the fire for the stuff that was going on with like NASA and everything else. This concept of the reusable spacecraft,
Right.
once again comes into the forefront. And why this spacecraft is so viable with SpaceX is because of its reusability. The fucking booster sections go and land themselves on platforms and shit like that. And
which I think we talked about that a little over a month ago when I asked you, what the fuck was that demonstration all about?
oh, when they launched, it looked like a fucking a silo.
Yeah,
like a grain
the
silo.
grain silo.
Yeah, for the hop test.
Yep.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, is that the catalyst? Is that the catalyst for having something like this out? Because we're getting ready in November. I'm 90% positive in November is when we're going to launch. It's dubbed Crew 1. So it's the full manning. Like what we saw with SpaceX was basically like that was the test flight.
Yeah.
That was Columbia in 1981. Was we had 2 guys out of the I think 4 that are going to be in the complement for the Crew 1.
Yeah.
I think it's 4. Somebody in the chat correct me. Jamie, bring that up.
Yeah.
So you had those guys go up, they do the test flight, everything looks fucking great. Now you're going to send people back up into space, like legit. Like now this is like we're getting into our progress and doing and getting NASA's foot in the United States back into the space business.
Yep. And I mean, we already talked about how a few months back we launched another Mars rover.
Yeah.
That's on its way to fucking Mars right now.
Yep. In spring, that's gonna, man. I when that gets ready to fucking land in the spring, I'm gonna have all the nerdgasm.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna
yeah.
be at full froth, man.
Fuck yeah. We'll have to spend a couple episodes talking about the previous Mars rovers, this one, and allegedly we're going back to the moon in 24.
Allegedly.
That's something else they're talking about. So
yeah, this heavy lift capability that we're using right now to get shit back and forth to the space station is kind of it's one step in towards getting people and fucking crafts to the moon again.
Yep.
And listen, this particular thing, if you're listening to this episode and we're talking about Challenger and the space shuttle and everything else, like if you're into this, if you're into what's going on right now with SpaceX and everything else, get yourself a book about the Apollo program. Learn about, like, you could read The Right Stuff, which is a novelization, but historically it's accurate. You could read a book like The Right Stuff or watch that movie, but you need to read about the Apollo program. The groundbreaking things that happen in order to get the size of that Saturn V rocket to get what seems to be a relatively small payload. Like this is what physics is all about. This is what getting this much mass to be able to get through out of the Earth's atmosphere to be able to get it throwing towards the fucking moon, and how much energy it needs it's fucking fascinating.
And
it's absolutely fucking fascinating.
And here's the reality. We'll close it with this. All of this is ultimately for one goal, right? And that's, if humanity is going to be eternal, if humanity is going to exist for as long as existence, we have to have a space program, and we're eventually going to have to leave the Earth.
Yeah.
So if, thousands of years from now, if humans want to continue to survive and exist, we have to find a way to get off of this fucking planet and go somewhere else. And these are the building blocks for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I read a lot of good stuff about that, talk about this, like this type of dogma, like, how human beings would exist outside of our solar system. And interestingly enough, just today, I was reading an article that talked about this book this guy just put out. He's a scientist. His big thing is terraforming, like the science of terraforming and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And the dude is actually called, fuck, I don't want to fuck this up. I'll get more information and I'll throw it out there to people that are interested. But he basically, his argument is like why our reaching for space and reaching for Mars and everything else is actually making the human race less viable. It's very interesting, and I think I'm going to read it just to have that perspective.
Okay.
Because I encourage everyone out there, like if you're truly interested in learning, sometimes you have to read the stuff that doesn't support your ideas.
Right.
Because it's going to make you better.
And I'm sure that could lead to a real ethereal discussion about, well, you know, if we lived simpler, if we lived like the fucking caveman, no industrial revolution or anything, no fucking blasting rockets into the atmosphere, the Earth would probably live longer in general, and then we just have to worry about whenever the fucking sun burns out.
Yeah. The book series about the Bobiverse that I've been telling you about, which is, I'm almost done the 4th book. It gets into a lot of this, and it's very ethereal. And it's very thought-provoking with shit like that when you're talking about some of the existence of a human form over so many centuries and having to what they're doing. A lot of these things kind of collide all in the same point. It's fucking... I don't know if it's a Facebook algorithm that made this thing fucking pop up to prompt me to read this thing. Like, I don't know how... Like, if there's Facebook AI that's fucking reading my mind at this point.
Oh yeah, it's good.
But there's a lot of cool shit out there it's fascinating.
Yep.
It really is. And stuff like this, things like the Challenger documentary and stuff like that, it's supposed to be thought provoking.
Yep.
Think about the risk. Think about the legacy that you might be leaving behind, or some of these are heroes, air quote, that in the legacy they leave behind, and things like that going forward. It's really very thought provoking.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do another episode like this, not for a while, because this.
So no Chernobyl, you're saying?
Well, no, Chernobyl. That was fucking. Listen, I'm all about fucking stepping all over the Soviet Union. I mean, I don't have any problem at all like that. Yeah, it's tragic, the fucking lives lost, blah 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 blah. But fucking Jesus Christ, you talk about people that just were so full of their own shit, man. That was the Soviets.
Yeah.
So yeah, Chernobyl's not that. We need to do some fun shit.
We'll do some more. Yeah, some more upbeat for next episode. We don't know what yet, but we'll let you guys know when we decide. But yeah, we'll try to bring the vibe up a little bit.
Yeah, really. It's very difficult. Like this is something I am personally passionate about.
Yeah, and I mean honestly, in this short amount of time that we've been talking, like 2 hours, like we could have gone a hell of a lot longer, gotten into more detail. But at the end of the day.
Could have gotten a lot more detail.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we just
picture 10-year-old Dave, like just looking at solid rocket boosters after this thing. Like, there's all these details about the solid rocket booster, and it talks about the joints and all the other stuff, and yeah,
that's eventually what did him in. All right, well, thanks everybody who's still in the chat. It was a good episode. I'm glad we did this. I'm glad I watched that documentary.
The timing was fortuitous.
Yeah,
the documentary came out and shit. Let's do it.
Yep. So, don't know what we're talking about next week. If you join the Sidebar Cantina private Facebook group, then that's the first place where you'll probably know what our next topic is. So join that if you're not a member. Please, everybody that's out there listening, if you're listening to this on our All Things Star Wars audio feed, thank you for still being subscribed to that, but please go also subscribe to From a Gen X Point of View, because we're not getting as much traffic there as I was kind of hoping by now.
Yeah.
Like I was hoping we'd get pretty much everybody transferring over, but if you were only there for the Star Wars, well, fuck, I guess, and not much we can do about that. But I know we're getting more listeners than that on a regular basis still, even with this new show. So please go to our main audio feed, From a Gen X Point of View, wherever you get your audio podcasts, and fucking subscribe and give us the downloads, because we need them, especially if we're going to continue to have El Yucateco as a sponsor. So we need it.
Get us on Spotify, get us on iHeartRadio, get us on your Google.
Write reviews.
Yeah, write reviews on iTunes. You can also find you can go on Facebook Live if you want to watch us live. I think on Instagram, I'm trying to, beat the drum a little bit for people to get involved. Like we will engage with you in the chat as much as I can possibly do it.
Yeah, without getting too distracted.
Yeah, and unfortunately today's episode, it was really difficult for me to pay attention to chat because this is something that deserved our detail.
Yeah, and again, kudos to JJ.
Yes.
Good job on that
done.
fucking doc.
Well done, JJ.
So, all right, well, is that all you got?
That's all I got.
All right, well, thanks again, everybody. And remember, everything we told you today was true from a Gen X point of view.
Okay, now what do I click?
Did you not know what I was?
No. I was trying to get to the. Hello. I was trying to get to that voice, but I can't warm up. I can't just go right into that.
Right, you gotta warm up.
Baked beans are off. Like I got it's.
Burn!
He's been a naughty boy. See you, Don. I gotta pee. Before we do the post show,
Well, we're doing the post show.
now, regardless, I have to pee.
Dave's pissing. Sorry. It's all right. I gotta export the audio. My arms are really itchy today. I got a bunch of bug bites. What can you do? Let me see if there's anything else in the chat that I missed. Buttons, fantastic. Thank you, Leonard Girl. Appreciate it. Yeah, Dragon Buddy. Very heavy subject. Exoplanets. Oh, man. I guess it's because I've had such an increased interest in space and whatnot. I'm getting more and more articles in my Google News feed because, again, it's targeted. I'm getting more articles regarding like space travel, things like that. I read an article today talking about how they've discovered that there's far more radiation on the moon than they had initially thought. So if we ever have, a permanent presence on the moon, any kind of a base or whatnot, then the people there are going to be exposed to much higher levels of radiation than they had initially anticipated.
Yeah.
Saw a bunch of stuff about SpaceX, how they're sending up a new GPS satellite soon.
Yeah, the GPS stuff is actually getting really, really interesting. We didn't bring it up. I wish we had.
What's that?
But the one, how the fucking report. Fuck. What the fuck am I? Why can't I think? Council of Elders. That was
the
investigation
commission
committee. Yeah,
yeah,
the commission.
yeah.
So,
yeah, how like Neil Armstrong was on there.
Yeah, Sally Ride was on it.
Yeah.
And it kind of got me in a rabbit hole with Sally Ride. But the fact that Sally Ride palmed the fucking general, the 2-star that was there.
Yeah.
Like this handwritten note that talked about the outside air temperature and the degradation of the fucking
O-rings. Yeah, and
the elasticity.
And they didn't really get into where she got that. Like, they didn't really... that kind of came out of nowhere.
I inferred that one of the engineers had got that to her.
Oh, okay. So, and then she was just passing it along also?
Because Sally Ride was one of those people that was, like, she was actually on that commission, and she was on the Columbia one, too.
Oh,
after
really?
the plumber crash, yeah.
Oh,
like,
shit.
she's fucking a doctorate, physicist, all this other fucking brilliant woman who died. I remember her passing away. I didn't realize what it was from. It was from pancreatic cancer. So she got taken early, but she was super involved in what NASA was doing. I mean, she was the poster child. She was the first American woman to go into space. But yeah, the fact that the general and Feynman, whatever the fuck his name is.
Yeah, that one engineer.
The physicist who was was a Nobel laureate and everything else. And the fact that his testimony and him, like, okay, here, General. The general goes to him and says, hey, we have this information. And he brings him to his house and goes out to the fucking car and says, when it's cold, I get leaks in my engine.
Yeah.
When it's cold. And it's because of O-rings. And he had O-rings spread out on his fucking work table. And the fact that something like that that's the breaking point.
Yeah.
It took that right person to have the ingenuity to get this information to that physicist And that physicist, because of his level of personality and the fact that he's a fucking Nobel laureate, not some schmuck, right?
Yep.
Not somebody that NASA could have went like, our scientists are smarter than you,
Right.
right? No, this is the guy. And for him to fucking present this information in such a way.
Yeah, to bring that cup of ice water, put the fucking O-ring in,
and talking about the elasticity, that's the type of shit that it's the stuff that movies are made of. Like you can't. This is the plot point, and some 2-star general was integral in that. Who, by all accounts, they didn't want to have military presence in this thing at all. So it's like. That's the type of shit that fascinates me. I've read so much about the Apollo program, and shit like that that's happened through the Apollo program, where it was like it took this kind of backdoor, like I'm going to talk to this engineer to make sure that this gets back to this, to make sure that gets done.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, no bullshit, man. With the white jet, this is how most of the shit got done.
Yeah,
like it was the meeting after the meeting, where decisions were actually made that would actually make things better. And
Slack. We use Slack at work now.
Really?
In addition to Teams, in addition to something else.
Slack was actually, we were using Slack before COVID as our messaging tool, but then there was something with the security. There was a security issue with it, so we stopped using it. But we use Mattermost for everything. So.
Right.
But yeah, Luna Girl talking about Princess Leia, Sally Ride, Mary Lou Retton. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
I remember Mary Lou Retton.
Yeah. How could you? She was on fucking Wheaties. She was on everything.
Yeah.
On every fucking commercial. I remember her on the Muppets. Mary Lou Retton was on the Muppets.
Oh, man.
Dude, it's the commercials with Mark Hamill and Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
It's fucking, that shit is fantastic.
Yeah.
I think Nick had actually showed it to me. He's like, "Oh, have you seen this? Was it Nick? I think it was Nick. I'm gonna give Nick the credit for it."
Right.
He's like, "Hey, have you seen these commercials?" I'm like, "No," and showed it to me.
What the fuck? Apparently the crackle's back.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
But now it
got better.
We didn't even do anything.
Yeah.
What the fuck? I moved my mic, so I wonder if it had something to do with that.
Yeah,
God damn it, man.
We're gonna have to do the mixer, man.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but yeah, we can't afford to fuck around with that shit.
Nope.
Who's winning football games right now?
Oh yeah, I think that's what some of these millions of fucking notifications I'm getting.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm when do not disturb. I know you don't upgrade your fucking iOS.
Correct.
But one of the nice features that came out with the new iOS is that it automatically fucking silences spam calls.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Well, that is handy.
Because I've been getting nonstop fucking calls about my car warranty and and political bullshit. So the fact that it's automatically being silenced is like muy bueno.
I have not gotten any political stuff. I get tons of political emails, but
yeah, it's just nonstop. The fucking shit about the car warranty, which
yeah, that's been going on for a couple of years now.
Yeah,
it seems like.
and I wasn't getting any of that, and then suddenly I started getting it. Well, like that's fucking annoying.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a meme today. It was like, I think it was like back in 1988 or something. You would get a phone call from the Reader's Digest trying to get you to subscribe, and now you're getting fucking phone calls like, you have multiple warrants from the FBI and fucking IRS and all this other bullshit.
Yeah. Well, and the problem is they're getting people with those, particularly older people.
Yeah, it's amazing it still works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh.
I mean, it's not going to work for much longer. I think us for sure, and then our kids are probably all just too cynical to buy into any of that shit, and we know better. And
the act of cold calling probably is, although, I think politics is always going to have some aspect of that, where it's just going to be reaching out and just cold calling people or cold contacting.
And honestly, for me, if I get a phone call on my phone and it's not a number I recognize, immediately to voicemail.
Yeah, same.
Do not pick up the phone if it's not somebody in my contacts.
Well, that's the tough part, because for me, because I'm the lodge secretary and I have all this. I don't have every fucking crew member in my new squadron in my phone.
Yeah.
So somebody might be calling for an issue with training or something else. So I'm like, fuck. There's some times where I'm just like, all right, I think it might be this person, so I'm going to answer it. And it's some fucking bullshit about my warranty.
Yep.
Because they change the number all the time. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
And yeah, they figured out ways to make them from your local area. So
which automatically keys me off. Like, wait a minute. I've had this cell phone number since fucking 1998. Yeah, 98 I think is when I got it. 98, 99. I've had the same cell phone number.
Damn.
And if it's like one or two numbers off of mine is suddenly calling me, like, no, they're not.
Yeah.
That's not a real thing.
Yeah.
Like, you're just
very unlikely.
Yeah, it's like, oh wow, it's my number neighbor? No, fuck you. I'm not answering that fucking phone call. Yeah,
Hey, Kristen gets that all the time. So Kristen has constantly been getting like AARP, fucking.
dude, I've been getting AARP shit since I was fucking 19 years old.
Like retiree Social Security stuff, like oh yeah, all kinds of like senior programs and all that. It's funny.
It's a waste. It's a waste. I think all the junk mail you get and like how much waste that generates.
But again, it has to be worth it for somebody because they're getting people with it.
Just enough. It's just enough.
Yeah.
I know Jeff was working for places that because you can work from home while he's doing school and everything, where cold calling and it's getting people cold calling people to see if they'll sell their houses.
Jesus.
And like, I guess they're doing it enough where they at least get somebody. Like, have some random person call you and say, "Hey, you interested in selling your home?"
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, well, okay. I've never gotten this far before. Like,
right.
It's insane.
Huh.
It's that dichotomy of like where we are as a society, and this documentary, to kind of bring it to what we were talking about, seeing some of this shit from the mid '80s, and the early '80s with the political strife and things that were happening within our society, within the American society at that time, and looking and now it's 40 plus years later, and the cycle repeateth.
Yeah.
And
you came back with a vengeance.
Right. So, and then you help that level of prosperity comes back around. That we enjoyed. 10 years ago.
You know what? It probably will, but from our perspective, it doesn't seem like things are ever going to get any better. But you got to put yourself back into the shoes of somebody who lived through the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Like, did they think the same way? Like, oh, like this fucking. The race riots and all this other shit is never going to go away. It's never going to stop. We're never going to get anywhere. And then things eventually got better.
It's an interesting, as human beings, how we cycle through things like that. And I think we'll continue to do that. The interesting part of that book that I was talking about the guy with the terraforming guy, the interesting concept of that is the fact that AI, the creation of AI so that we can get further into space and do these things, is what's going to help basically regress the human race. Because we're going to be pushing towards technology to do so much for us that as humans we're actually going to start degrading. The book I'm reading, the Bobaverse thing, which you'll probably never read, so I'm going to talk about it anyway.
Sure.
There is a species of being. They happen to they look like otters.
Okay.
They're a water-based race that has this from a technological perspective. This is hundreds of thousands of light years away from where Earth was.
Right.
And they built these things called a topopolis, right, which is basically a tube that rotates inside where it's a whole thing. Anyway,
okay.
I'm not even getting into all that, but it's all based on kind of things that have been talked about, from our scientists over a bunch of stuff. So it's just kind of extrapolates in that. But anyway, the idea was that this artificial intelligence was keeping this artificially generated practically utopia for this race. And the beings in that race that were they were technologically advanced enough to fucking have things like nuclear, fusion type reactions. They were able to actually have spacecraft and things like that, and satellites and telephones, and they were advanced enough to have, analogous things to what we had as humans.
Sure.
And they're deliberately being restricted by this artificial intelligence from having technology to be able to advance. But at the same time, it's like the people are like moving out of cities and they're going into more rural areas because they don't need to participate in society.
Right.
They'll get a little group of people that'll go off and they'll live off the land because the land is plenty. And then, so they're regressing back to a state where even communicating and talking and writing and shit like that, they don't need to do it anymore. There's so much they're actually regressing to the point where they're not going to school anymore. And it's because of this artificial intelligence, and because of the fact that they're living in a time when they don't need to have all these things. We're like, well, why would I continue to question my reality if my reality is so nice that I don't have to think about it?
Sure. And I mean, God, you could draw so many parallels to current day planet Earth. Like, you talk about the communication. Like, how has communication changed over the past 10 years with text messaging and email and everything else? Everything's so impersonal now. We've changed as a species how we communicate with each other very drastically over a very short period of time.
Yeah.
That's fucking wild to think about.
And what I worry about is how we are educating ourselves and what's important and what we're, what you're learning. Even today's technology. I mean, there's an argument to be made about like standardized testing and all that other stuff. But
yeah.
I think if you looked at it at the macro level, to go up and take the 35,000 foot view of that, it's not about what our kids are learning. It's about, are they getting enough knowledge to continue this, to generationally make sure we're still have an imagination, that we're asking the right questions and testing the boundaries of what's going on.
Yeah.
And not in a geopolitical sense, just with technologies and just figuring out the world around us.
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm super into looking at stuff like that, so I see more of it than probably most people do, but at the same time I worry that not everybody is getting this level of knowledge. Like, how many geologists are you going to have?
God, that's a good question.
In the next decade, like universities that produce geologists and people that are studying what the Earth is and what core sampling is doing, and everyone's so focused on climate change that you have like these people that are very specialized in that, but climate change isn't the issue. It's the Earth. It's understanding the Earth and what's going on. That's what's going to ensure the longevity of the human race.
It's true.
It's understanding enough of what's going on around you to make sure that you don't go into extinction.
Yeah.
So
very
ethereal shit.
Yeah, this is probably a good place to shut down because my bedtime is in like 20 minutes. So
Jason's bedtime.
Yep.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
8:40.
Yeah. That's why I didn't watch a fucking minute of the football game last night.
Wow.
So thanks everybody who's still in, but
yeah, thanks Luna Girl.
Time to say goodnight.
I'll look for the book stuff and I'll post it in the cantina for stuff that I was looking at.
Cool.
It's very interesting.
All right. You guys are the best. Have a good night.
Love you.